Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a nice idea if everyone can leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from in the world. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. It started small. At first, I didn't even notice. I live in a little apartment, just me and my cat, on the third floor of a building with thin walls and a lot of noise. You hear everything: arguments, kids running around, someone's music too loud at 2 a.m. It's annoying, but you get used to it after a while. There's a guy across the hall, middle-aged, thinning hair, always polite when we ran into each other. We'd say hi now and then in passing. He never seemed odd or anything. Just another neighbor. A few months ago, I started feeling watched. It's hard to explain because nothing was actually wrong at first. It's like that feeling when someone's staring at you in a crowded room, and you just know, even though you can't see them. It felt like that in my own apartment. Sometimes I'd glance out the window or check the peephole, but there was never anything there. Then little things started going missing. A pair of socks, a hairbrush, a necklace I liked. Stupid stuff, right? I thought I was just being forgetful. But one day, I noticed my toothbrush was wood even though I hadn't used it yet. That really freaked me out. I tried convincing myself I'd forgotten, but it stuck in my head. Around that time, the guy across the hall, Mark, he introduced himself once, started talking to me more. Always just when I'd leave for work or come back. He'd say things like, late night, or busy day at work. Stuff that didn't seem weird until I realized I hadn't told him anything about my job or schedule. I thought maybe he overheard me on the phone through the walls. It's not like I talk quietly. I stopped feeling comfortable at home. I'd keep my blinds closed all the time. I started locking my bedroom door when I slept. I even put a chair under the doorknob sometimes, which felt stupid, but it helped me relax enough to fall asleep. One night, around midnight, I heard a noise outside my door. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of sound you notice when everything else is quiet. A faint scrape, like metal on metal. My heart was pounding so hard I couldn't think straight. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the peephole. There was no one there. The next day, Mark asked me if I'd been okay the night before. Said he thought he heard something outside my door. That's when I started putting things together. How would he know unless he was the one out there? I didn't say anything to him. I just nodded and went inside. I called my mom that evening, trying to calm down. She told me to install cameras, so I bought a couple cheap ones online and set them up in my living room and kitchen. I didn't think I'd catch anything. I just wanted peace of mind. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, though, the living room camera caught movement at 3:14 a.m. My heart dropped when I watched the footage. Someone was in my apartment. It was Mark. He had a key. I saw him walking like he belonged there. He didn't even hesitate. He went straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and drank from a bottle of orange juice I just bought. Then he wandered into the living room and stared at my couch for a while, like he was thinking about something. After a few minutes, he left. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went straight to the building manager. I showed him the footage and demanded to know why Mark had a key to my place. The manager looked embarrassed and said Mark used to be the maintenance guy years ago. He must have kept the keys. They changed the locks immediately. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. That same evening, I came home to find my door unlocked. The new lock. I was terrified, but I forced myself to go inside. Everything looked normal until I checked my bedroom. My closet door was open, and I always keep it shut. Inside, I found a small camera hidden on a shelf, pointing at my bed. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the camera. I called the police right away. They came and took a report, but they said without proof Mark put the camera there, they couldn't do much. I showed them the footage of him entering my apartment, but they said it wasn't enough to prove intent. I felt sick. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's place. I didn't care about anything else in my apartment. I just needed to get out. The next morning, my friend convinced me to check the footage from my cameras again, just in case. I found more clips. Mark had been in my apartment multiple times. The footage showed him moving things around, my hairbrush, my toothbrush, even my clothes. He'd sit on my couch and look around like he was imagining living there. The worst clip was from the night before I left. He'd been in my bedroom, standing over my bed while I slept. I don't know how long he was there, but at one point, he reached out like he was going to touch my face and then stopped. I showed the police everything, and that finally got them to act. They arrested Mark the next day. They found more cameras and a notebook in his apartment with detailed notes about me, what I wore, when I left, what I did at home. He'd been watching me for months, planning something. They wouldn't tell me what. I moved out of that building the same week. I still feel like someone's watching me sometimes, but at least I know I'm safe now. Mark's in jail. I don't know for how long, but I hope it's enough. I don't think I'll ever feel completely okay again, but at least I got out. I wasn't even supposed to be out there. The trail I planned to take was closed because of some storm damage, and instead of just turning back, I thought I'd try another path I saw on the map. It looked like it looped back around to the main one eventually, and I figured, what's the harm? It was early, and I had plenty of daylight. At first, it was fine. The trail was narrow but clear enough to follow. It wasn't marked like the main one, but I could still tell where it went. The woods were quiet, almost too quiet, but I figured it was just because it wasn't a popular route. I didn't see anyone else out there all morning. That should have been my first clue to turn around. After about an hour, the trail started to fade. I kept thinking it would pick up again, but it didn't. I ended up bushwhacking through the undergrowth, trying to find my way back to something familiar. My GPS wasn't working, probably because of the trees or the hills. I still don't know. All I knew was that I was lost. I told myself not to panic. I had my backpack with supplies, water, snacks, a flashlight, a knife. I'd spent plenty of time outdoors before. I figured I'd just keep walking and eventually hit a road or a stream or something I could follow back to civilization. But as the hours passed, I started to get this feeling, like something wasn't right. I can't explain it. It wasn't just the usual fear of being lost. It was like I wasn't alone out there. I kept stopping to listen, but the woods were silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. No birds, no animals. Just quiet. Then I saw the first trap. It was crude but effective, a pit covered with sticks and leaves, deep enough to break a leg if you fell in. It was old, with moss growing on the edges, but it looked deliberate. Not like something nature would do. I stepped around it carefully, suddenly hyper-aware of where I was putting my feet. A little further on, I found another trap. This one was more recent, a snare made of wire, hidden under a patch of ferns. It was fresh. That's when I started to get really scared. This wasn't someone hunting deer or rabbits. These traps were the kind of thing you'd use for something bigger. something human-sized. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't know which way to go. I kept moving, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. That's when I found the camp. It was in a clearing, hidden by thick trees and brush. There were 3 tents, a fire pit, and a wooden post in the center with chains bolted to it. The ground was trampled, and there were old stains around the post that made my stomach turn. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at it. Then I heard voices. They were faint at first, coming from somewhere in the woods behind me. I ducked down behind a fallen log, heart racing, and tried to stay as still as possible. The voices got louder, clearer. 2 men, talking casually like they were out for a stroll. I couldn't make out everything they said, but I caught enough to know they were looking for someone. "Did you see where they went?" one of them said. "Not far." "Tracks were fresh," the other answered. I didn't have to guess who they were talking about. My boots had left prints in the mud. I cursed myself for not being more careful. They were close now, maybe 20 feet away. I could see them through the trees, both of them in camouflage, carrying rifles. They looked like hunters, but not the kind you see in magazines. These guys were rough, dirty, like they'd been out there for days. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing. One of them stopped and scanned the area, his eyes passing right over the log I was behind. "Let's circle back," he said. "They can't be far." They moved off in the other direction, and I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore before I moved. My hands were shaking as I pulled my knife out of my bag. It felt useless against their rifles, but it was all I had. I knew I had to get out of there before they came back. I kept low, moving as quietly as I could. Every step felt like it took forever. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the camp and the men. I kept expecting to hear them behind me, but the woods stayed silent. After what felt like hours, I found a creek. The water was shallow and clear, and I knew it would eventually lead to something, a road, a town, something. I started following it, staying in the water to hide my tracks. My feet were freezing, but I didn't care. It was better than leaving a trail. I don't know how long I followed that creek. The sun was starting to set, and I was getting desperate. Then I heard the sound of an engine. Faint but steady, somewhere in the distance. I climbed out of the creek and pushed through the trees, following the noise until I stumbled onto a dirt road. There was an old pickup truck parked on the side, and a man loading wood into the back. I almost cried when I saw him. I must have looked like a mess, muddy, scratched up, shaking, but he didn't ask any questions. He just handed me a bottle of water and drove me to the nearest town. I told the police everything. I don't know if they ever found the camp or the men. I haven't been back to that area, and I don't plan to. I still hear those voices sometimes, in my dreams. I got the babysitting job through a friend of my mom's. The mom, Lisa, needed someone to watch her 2 kids, Sam and Ellie, for a few hours a couple nights a week while she worked late shifts. The kids were great. Sam was 9 and loved drawing, and Ellie was 6 and full of energy. Lisa was always nice, too, but I could tell she was stressed. She worked a lot, and I think she was going through a divorce or something. She never said much about it. One night, a little after 8, I had just put Ellie to bed. Sam was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table working on one of his drawings. I was cleaning up when the doorbell rang. It made me jump because no one ever came by this late. I looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there. He looked about Lisa's age, with short dark hair and a beard. He wasn't dressed like a delivery guy or anything, just jeans and a jacket. I didn't open the door. Something about him felt off. Instead, I called through the door, "Can I help you?" "I'm their dad," he said, his voice calm but low. "Lisa told me to come pick up the kids." That made me freeze. Lisa had never mentioned their dad. I didn't even know he was in the picture. I texted her right away, but she didn't respond. I didn't know what to do, so I just said, "I'll have to call Lisa to confirm." His tone changed instantly. "She knows I'm here," he said sharply. "Open the door." I told him again that I needed to check with her, but I was already backing away. My stomach was in knots. Sam was still at the table, watching me. He looked confused but not scared yet. The man banged on the door hard, making Sam flinch. "Open the door," he shouted. "I have a right to see my kids." That's when I grabbed Sam and told him to go upstairs to his room. I didn't want him near the door. I locked it and grabbed my phone to call Lisa, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling 911, but the man must have heard me, because he shouted, "Don't you dare call the cops." He started pounding on the door harder, and I could hear the handle rattling. I was shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I didn't know if the door would hold. Then everything went quiet. I thought maybe he'd left, but I was too scared to check. I told Sam and Ellie to stay in their rooms and locked myself in Lisa's bedroom. I stood there, trying to breathe, and then I heard a noise outside the window. It was faint, like something scraping against the side of the house. I looked out and saw him. He was climbing up the side of the house toward the second floor windows. I panicked and ran to the kids' rooms. Ellie was half asleep, but Sam was wide awake, sitting on his bed, clutching his sketchbook like it could protect him. I told them to stay quiet and follow me. We went into the bathroom and locked the door. It was the only room with no windows. I whispered to Sam to keep Ellie calm while I tried calling the police again. This time, the call went through. I told them everything, my voice shaking so bad I could barely get the words out. The dispatcher said they were sending someone, but it might take a while since we were in a quiet suburban area. The whole time, I could hear footsteps upstairs. He was inside. I didn't know how he got in. Maybe one of the windows was unlocked, or maybe he broke one. All I knew was that he was in the house. I could hear him moving around, opening doors, calling out, "Sam. Ellie. Daddy's here." The way he said it made my skin crawl. He didn't sound like a dad trying to see his kids. He sounded like someone who was enjoying this. I whispered to the kids to stay quiet, but Ellie started to cry. I covered her mouth gently, trying to calm her down. Sam was holding her hand, his face pale. I had no idea what to do. Then the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the bathroom doorknob rattled. I thought I was going to throw up. He knew we were in there. "Open the door," he said, his voice muffled but calm again. I just wanted to talk to them. I didn't answer. I just held onto the kids and prayed the lock would hold. He started pounding on the door, harder and harder, yelling, "Open it. Open the door, now." I grabbed the only thing I could find, a metal towel rack, and held it like a bat. I knew it wouldn't do much, but I had to try. Then I heard the sirens. They were faint at first, but they were getting closer. He must have heard them too, because he stopped pounding. I heard him run down the stairs, and then the front door slammed. I stayed in the bathroom with the kids until the police arrived. When they came in, I could barely talk. I just pointed them upstairs. They didn't find him. Lisa came home a few minutes later, frantic. She hugged the kids and kept apologizing, but I was still too shaken to process everything. Later, she told me the full story. The man was her ex-husband. He'd been abusive, and she had a restraining order against him. He wasn't supposed to come near her or the kids, but he'd been trying to find them for months. I never went back to that house. Lisa said she was moving somewhere safer, but I didn't want to know the details. I just hoped they'd be okay. I was traveling alone, taking a long-distance train route through a string of small towns to visit my sister. It was one of those trips where you have to switch trains at several stations, and it takes forever, but I didn't mind. I had my book, some snacks, and a few hours to kill. It felt peaceful at first, just the sound of the train, the occasional announcement, and the rhythmic sway of the car as it moved along the tracks. It was during my second train that I first noticed him. He was sitting diagonally across from me, not close enough to feel intrusive, but just enough that I could see him clearly. He was dressed in dark clothes, a hoodie pulled low over his face, and he had this stillness about him, like he was trying not to draw attention. That's what made him noticeable, in a way, how deliberate it seemed. At first, I didn't think much of it. A lot of people keep to themselves on trains, especially on long trips. But when I glanced up from my book, I realized he was watching me. Not glancing, not zoning out in my direction, but watching. His head was turned just slightly, his eyes fixed on me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was staring into space, or maybe it was just a coincidence. I turned back to my book and tried to focus, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. When we reached the next station, I decided to switch cars. It was crowded enough that I could blend in, and I figured I'd just lose him in the shuffle. I got up, grabbed my bag, and walked down the platform to another car. I settled into a new seat and felt a wave of relief. The train started moving again, and for a while, I thought that was the end of it. But when I glanced toward the other end of the car, he was there. Standing near the door, holding onto the rail. His hoodie was still up, and he wasn't looking at me directly, but I knew it was him. That's when I started to feel the panic creeping in. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe he just happened to pick the same car. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. When we stopped at the next station, I decided to switch trains entirely. It wasn't part of my plan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to get away from him. I grabbed my stuff and got off, walking quickly toward the connecting platform. I didn't look back. I boarded the next train and chose a seat in the middle, surrounded by other passengers. I felt safer with people around me. The train pulled out of the station, and I kept an eye on the door, waiting to see if he'd followed. He got on at the last second. I froze when I saw him. He didn't sit down this time. He stood by the door again, holding the rail, his eyes scanning the car until they landed on me. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't do anything. He just stared. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I wanted to tell someone, but what would I even say? A guy looked at me weird. It wasn't like he'd done anything yet. At the next station, I decided to test something. I waited until the last possible moment, then got up and stepped off the train. I walked quickly, weaving through the crowd, and boarded a different train heading in the same direction. When the train started moving, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I'd lost him. Maybe it was all in my head. Then I saw him again. He was sitting farther down the car this time, not looking at me directly but angled just enough that I knew he was aware of me. That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence. He was following me. I felt trapped. I was in the middle of nowhere, on a train with nowhere to go, and this man was stalking me. I thought about getting off at the next stop and trying to find help, but what if he followed me? What if no one was there? I decided to stay put for now, to see what he'd do. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call for help if I needed to. The train ride felt endless. Every time I looked up, he was there, watching. The other passengers were oblivious, lost in their own worlds. When we reached another station, I made my move. I got off and went straight to the station attendant. I told her what was happening, my voice shaking. She looked skeptical at first, but when I pointed him out, her expression changed. "He's been hanging around the station all day," she said quietly. "I'll call security." I waited near her desk, trying to stay calm. I could see him on the platform, pacing now, looking around like he was trying to decide what to do. Security arrived a few minutes later, 2 men in uniforms. They approached him, and I saw the way he tensed up. He didn't run, but he didn't stay either. He walked away, out of the station and into the night. The security guard stayed with me until my next train arrived. I didn't see him again after that, but I couldn't relax until I reached my sister's house. Even then, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to appear. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't want to know. I was driving through the middle of nowhere, trying to make it to my cousin's house before midnight. It was one of those stretches of highway where the only lights come from your own car, and the road feels like it goes on forever. I was running low on gas, which was stupid because I should have filled up before leaving the last town. But I figured I'd be fine, there's always a gas station somewhere, right? I finally saw one after what felt like hours. It was old, the kind of place that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s. One pump, a small building with a flickering neon sign, and not a single other car in sight. I pulled in and parked, relieved. The pump looked ancient, but I didn't care as long as it worked. The station was empty. No one inside, no clerk at the counter, just a bell on the door that jingled when I went in. There were rows of dusty snacks, a few drinks in a cooler, and a faint smell of something sour. I called out, "Hello," but no one answered. I stood there for a second, feeling weirdly exposed under the fluorescent lights, then decided I'd just pay at the pump. I went back outside, and that's when I noticed the car. It wasn't there when I pulled in, but now it was parked near the side of the building, almost hidden in the shadows. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see inside. I told myself it was probably just someone who worked there or another traveler like me, but it felt off. I started pumping gas, keeping one eye on the car. My heart was racing for no reason, and I kept telling myself to calm down. It's just a car. Nothing's wrong. Then I heard footsteps. I turned, and a man was walking toward me. He looked rough, dirty clothes, unshaven, and his eyes were wild. He had a gun in his hand, pointed low but unmistakable. My stomach dropped. "Don't move," he said. I froze. My hand was still on the pump, but I didn't dare finish filling the tank. I couldn't even breathe right. He came closer, and I could see he was sweating. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking, but the gun didn't waver. "Keys," he said, motioning with the gun. "Give me your keys." I hesitated, and he stepped closer. "Now," he barked. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled them out, holding them up like they might bite me. He snatched them and shoved them into his own pocket, then grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the gas station building. I stumbled, nearly tripping over my own feet, but he didn't let go. Inside, he pushed me to the ground behind the counter. "Stay there," he said. "Don't try anything." His voice was tight, like he was barely keeping it together. I stayed down, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I could hear him pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. "Stupid, stupid," he kept saying. "Should have kept going. Should have just kept driving." I realized he wasn't just some random guy. He was running from something. Maybe the police, maybe worse. And now he was stuck here with me. After a few minutes, he stopped pacing and crouched down in front of me. He was too close, his face inches from mine. I could see every bead of sweat on his forehead, every crack in his dry lips. He looked desperate. "Anyone know you're here?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I lied." "Your phone," he said. "Where is it?" "In my car," I said, which was true. I'd left it in the cup holder. His eyes flicked toward the door, and I could see him thinking. I didn't want him to go out there and find it. If he looked hard enough, he'd see my bag, my ID, everything. "Stay here," he said again, and then he was gone. I heard the bell on the door jingle as he went outside. I didn't move at first. I was too scared. But then I realized this was my chance. I crawled to the end of the counter, staying low, and peeked out. He was by my car, looking inside. His back was to me. I looked around the gas station, trying to find something, anything I could use. There was a metal trash can, a broom, and a heavy fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. I grabbed the extinguisher, my hand shaking so bad I almost dropped it. He was still outside, but I knew he'd be back any second. I crept to the door and waited, my heart pounding. When the bell jingled again and he stepped inside, I swung the extinguisher as hard as I could. It hit him in the side of the head, and he stumbled, dropping the gun. I didn't think. I just grabbed it and pointed it at him, my whole body shaking. He looked up at me, blood trickling down his face, and for a second, I thought he might lunge at me. "Stay back," I shouted. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. He froze, staring at the gun, and then he raised his hands slowly. "Don't do anything stupid," he said, but I could hear the fear in his voice now. I grabbed the phone from behind the counter and dialed 911, keeping the gun pointed at him the whole time. My hands were slick with sweat, and I was terrified I'd drop it or accidentally pull the trigger. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until the police arrived. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. When the flashing lights finally appeared, I collapsed to the floor, shaking and crying. The officers came in, guns drawn, and took him away. They told me later he was a fugitive, wanted for armed robbery and assault. He'd been on the run for days, and I was just unlucky enough to cross his path. I still think about it every time I stop for gas. It started with small things. A loaf of bread went missing from the kitchen counter, and I thought maybe one of the kids had taken it to their room. A few cans of soup disappeared from the pantry, but I figured I must have miscounted during grocery shopping. Then there were the noises, soft creaks and shuffles late at night. My husband said it was the house settling, but it didn't feel right. The kids would come into our room some nights, saying they heard someone walking in the hallway. My youngest, Emily, even swore she saw a shadow in her doorway. We brushed it off as nightmares, maybe too much TV before bed, but it stayed in the back of my mind. One night, I stayed up late finishing some work at the dining table. The house was quiet, everyone else was asleep. I got up to grab a glass of water and froze when I heard a noise overhead. It wasn't the usual creak of the attic beams. It was a distinct sound, like someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. I stared at the ceiling, holding my breath, waiting to hear it again. When it came, it was quieter, like whoever or whatever it was had stopped. I convinced myself it was a raccoon or some other animal. We had squirrels in the attic once, and I told myself this was the same thing. The next morning, I asked my husband to check the attic. He climbed up there with a flashlight and a broom, banging around for a while before coming down and shrugging. "Nothing up there," he said. "Probably just the wind." I wanted to believe him, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made me think he hadn't looked very closely. The turning point came a week later. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was woken up by a loud thud from upstairs. My heart was racing before I even opened my eyes. I sat up in bed, straining to hear, but the house was silent again. My husband was snoring beside me, and I didn't want to wake him, so I got up to check on the kids. Emily's room was closest to the attic hatch, and as I passed by her door, I felt a cold draft. I glanced up and froze. The attic hatch was open, the panel slightly ajar. I stood there, staring up at it, my stomach in knots. I told myself it could have shifted on its own, that maybe we'd closed it wrong last time, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I checked on Emily and my older son, Jake. Both were fast asleep. I wanted to shut the hatch and go back to bed, but I couldn't bring myself to get close to it. Instead, I locked the bedroom doors and stayed awake until morning. The next day, I brought it up again to my husband. He brushed it off, said it was just the latch coming loose, but I insisted we check the attic together. We went up, and at first, everything seemed normal. Boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, and the usual dust and cobwebs. But then I noticed something out of place, a blanket rolled up in the far corner, with a pile of wrappers and empty water bottles beside it. My stomach dropped. "What is that?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. We both just stared at it, the realization sinking in. Someone had been living in our attic. We climbed down quickly, locking the hatch behind us. My husband wanted to call the police right away, but I insisted we check the house first, make sure the person wasn't still there. We went room to room, checking every closet, every corner. Nothing. The police arrived within half an hour. They searched the attic and found more signs of someone staying their old clothes, a small flashlight, even a notebook filled with scribbles. They said it looked like whoever it was had been there for weeks, maybe months. What scared me the most was what they found near the blanket. A small box with a few of our things in it, one of Emily's toys, a photo of our family, and my missing wedding ring. That night, we stayed at my parents' house. I couldn't bear to stay in that house, knowing someone had been watching us, living above us. The police never caught whoever it was. They said the person probably slipped out when we weren't home one day and didn't come back. We moved out a few months later. Even now, I can't walk into a house without checking the attic first. I wasn't supposed to be at the parking garage that night. I'd been working late at the office, and my boss had asked me to stay and finish up some paperwork. By the time I got to my car, it was already dark, and the place was mostly empty. just a few cars scattered around, and the usual hum of fluorescent lights overhead. It wasn't anything unusual, just a typical end to a long day. I walked past a few parked cars, pulling out my keys. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It was quick, just a flash of movement, but it made me stop. There was a man, standing near one of the cars, talking to another person who was sitting in the driver's seat. The way they were talking, it didn't look friendly. There was no shouting or anything, but something felt off. I turned to keep walking, thinking I should just ignore it, but then I heard a noise. A loud thud. My gut tightened, and I turned back just in time to see the man in the parking lot pull something from his jacket, a knife, I think, and drive it into the other person's chest. It all happened so fast. One moment, the guy in the car was just sitting there, and the next, he was slumped over the wheel, blood dripping down his shirt. I froze. I couldn't move. I don't even know why I stayed hidden behind the pillar, watching him finish whatever he was doing. I should have run, called the cops, but I couldn't. I couldn't take my eyes off him. The man looked up, and I swear, for a split second, he looked right at me. I held my breath, praying he didn't see me. He didn't, though. He turned and walked away without looking back. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade, my heart pounding. The adrenaline started kicking in. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just leave the body there. I couldn't just ignore what I'd seen. But at the same time, I was terrified. I stood there for what felt like forever, just staring at the car, wondering if I should go to the police. What if I was wrong? What if I didn't see what I thought I saw? I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called 911. I tried to stay calm as I gave them the location, described the man I'd seen, but my hands were shaking so bad, it was hard to talk clearly. They told me to stay on the line, but I couldn't. I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to leave. I ran to my car, and the whole time, I felt like someone was watching me. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was no one there. I drove out of the garage, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept hearing that thud in my mind, the sound of the knife hitting the guy, and I couldn't get it out of my head. When I got home, I called in sick for the next day. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about it. The whole thing was a blur. The face of the man, the blood on the steering wheel, the way he just left. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe I didn't see what I thought I did. But I knew I had. The next day, I was trying to shake it off when I got a strange message. It was a text from an unknown number. "I know you saw me." My heart dropped. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call the police, but what could I tell them? "Hey, I saw a guy murder someone last night, and now he's texting me." It sounded insane. I tried to ignore it, tried to go on with my day. But it kept eating at me. The next few days were hell. I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to go back to work. Every time I left, I kept seeing that man's face in my mind, and the way he looked at me, like he knew I was there, watching him. Then, it got worse. I was at the grocery store when I felt someone behind me. I turned, and there he was. The man from the parking garage. He was standing just a few feet away, looking at me. I swear my heart stopped. I froze. I couldn't even speak. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared. And then he smiled. A cold, empty smile. "You should have stayed quiet," he said. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something, and I felt like I was going to suffocate. Then, without another word, he walked away, disappearing down another aisle. I didn't stay in the store much longer. I ran out of there, almost tripping over myself, and drove home as fast as I could. I didn't know who to call. The police again? I had no evidence. They couldn't do anything. That night, I made sure all the doors were locked, the windows shut tight. But even with all that, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept hearing sounds outside. The footsteps of someone walking around my car, my house. I kept checking the locks, even though I knew I had double-checked them before. The next day, I went to work, but my mind wasn't there. I couldn't focus. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to show up at my desk. My boss noticed, asked me if I was all right, but I lied and said I wasn't feeling well. When I went out for lunch, I saw him again. This time, I saw him through the window of a coffee shop. He was sitting at a table, watching me. I was sure of it. He didn't even try to hide it. I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my food and left in a hurry, but I knew for sure that he was following me. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up. Every moment I was awake, I felt like I was being hunted. It was like he was always one step ahead, always watching. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just leave town, he would find me anywhere. But then, it finally clicked. I went to the police station the next morning, and I told them everything. About the murder, the texts, the way he'd followed me. And this time, they listened. They took me seriously. They set up a plan to catch him. It wasn't easy, but eventually, they got him. The police said he had a long history of violence and that he'd been watching me for days, maybe longer. I didn't know how he found me or how he got so close, but they told me I was lucky. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the police. What I do know is that I don't feel safe anymore, not anywhere. The fear of knowing he was so close, always just a step behind me, is something I'll never forget. I had never thought much about sleep studies before. I always had trouble sleeping, and when I saw an ad in the local paper offering a study with a nice sum of money, it seemed like a no-brainer. They were looking for volunteers to stay in a research facility overnight, monitor your sleep, and basically just make sure you didn't have any issues. I figured it would be a good way to make a bit of extra cash, especially since they promised it would be over in a few days, and all I had to do was sleep. The facility looked like any other clinical building when I showed up for the first night. The walls were sterile white, and there was a small waiting area with a receptionist who gave me a brief rundown of what to expect. There were about 5 other people there that first night, all of us filling out paperwork and signing forms. I didn't think much of it at the time. They told us that the study would be mostly routine, nothing invasive, just monitoring our sleep patterns. The first night went by without much event. They hooked me up to some wires, nothing unusual, just a few electrodes on my scalp and a couple on my chest. They monitored my heart rate, breathing, and brain waves. There was a camera in the corner of the room, but that was standard procedure, they said, so they could ensure everything went smoothly while I slept. By the second night, I was getting used to the routine. The researchers were polite, mostly young staff, one woman named Linda who checked in on me every couple of hours, and another man, Greg, who operated the equipment. They seemed nice enough. Linda was always kind and explained things in detail when I had questions, and Greg was quiet, but he did his job without any issues. It was on the third night when I started to notice something odd. I woke up in the middle of the night, well, not exactly woke up, but I became aware of the room around me. The light from the hallway was just enough to make out the shapes of the room. I noticed Linda standing by the door, not really doing anything. She was just standing there, staring at me, like she was waiting for something. I thought I had just woken up from a deep sleep, so I tried to shake it off, but it felt wrong. It felt like she was watching me too closely. The next day, I asked her about it. She brushed it off, saying that sometimes people have odd dreams in the middle of the night. I didn't press further because, honestly, it sounded like something I would have imagined. But it didn't sit well with me. By the fourth night, the experience took a darker turn. I woke up again, but this time I felt a sharp pain in my arm. I wasn't sure what had caused it, and when I looked down, I saw that there was a needle sticking out of my arm, one of those long, thick needles used for injections. I felt a surge of panic. I yanked it out, but there was no one in the room. No staff members, no Linda, no Craig. Just me and the wires still attached to me. I immediately started looking around, trying to figure out what had happened. I checked my phone, and it was dead, of course. The clock on the wall showed it was around 2 a.m. I tried to call out, but no one came. I sat there for a while, listening to the faint hum of the equipment. Something didn't feel right. The next morning, I went to the front desk and asked to speak with the director of the study. The receptionist looked a little uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure if she should let me speak with anyone. After some hesitation, she told me I'd have to wait until later in the day because the staff was in meetings. I felt a rising sense of unease. They were just acting too strange. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the situation was beginning to feel off. The other participants, who had been there the same amount of time as I had, didn't seem to notice anything wrong. They all seemed fine. They were all going through the motions like it was just another study, like they didn't care about what was happening in the background. That night, I decided to stay awake. I needed answers, and I couldn't let it go any longer. I turned off the lights, made sure I wasn't hooked up to anything more than the basic monitors, and just waited. I must have nodded off at some point because I woke up to the sound of footsteps. I could barely make out the figure of a person standing near the bed. It was Linda. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to draw attention, but I kept my eyes open. She stood there for several long minutes, just watching me. This time, she didn't even try to hide it. It was like she wanted me to see her. Suddenly, she walked out of the room, and I could hear murmurs in the hallway. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could tell it was more than just casual conversation. It sounded like instructions, like they were talking about me. I felt trapped. My stomach churned as I realized that this wasn't just some normal sleep study. I had no idea what was going on, but I was sure it wasn't good. The next morning, I went to the front desk again. The receptionist wasn't there, but the director was. A man in his late 50s, with thick glasses and a too calm demeanor. I asked him about the injection I had found in my arm the previous night. His face didn't change, but he didn't seem surprised. He just nodded and said, "Sometimes we need to collect some extra data. It's part of the process." I tried to explain that I didn't want to participate anymore, that I needed to leave, but he wouldn't let me. He told me it was too late to back out now, that I had already signed the agreement, and leaving now could result in serious consequences. It didn't make sense, but the way he said it, like it was a threat, made me freeze up. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I had to get out. I knew I couldn't trust them. I started looking for any way out. I checked the windows, the back doors, but everything was locked tight. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized they were keeping me there on purpose. The others, my fellow participants, were gone. I hadn't seen them in hours, maybe even days, but I couldn't be sure. I couldn't trust the time. I spent the next few hours trying to figure out what to do, and I finally managed to slip out of the building through a service door. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't stop to look back. I'm still not sure what was really going on in that place. I don't know what they were trying to do with us. I don't know if it was illegal drugs, or experiments, or something worse, but the whole thing felt wrong from the start. It wasn't until I saw the medical files I managed to grab on my way out that I realized just how deep it went. There were more names, more data, more patients than I could count, and the conditions were all listed in a way that didn't match up with a normal study. I left town. I don't know if they're still operating, or if anyone else is still trapped in that place, but I couldn't risk finding out. It's the kind of thing I can't forget, but I try to move past it. I hope no one else ends up in that situation, but sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who got out. My partner and I had just finished watching a play and decided to head home. We flagged down a taxi, and a car pulled up. The driver was a man, middle-aged, with a friendly smile. We got in the car, and he started the engine. The driver asked us how the play was, and we chatted for a few minutes about the plot and the acting. But then he started to ask us personal questions, like where we lived and what we did for a living. I felt a bit uneasy, but my partner seemed unfazed. As we drove, I started to realize that the driver was taking a different route than the one we usually took. He was heading down a dark and deserted road, and I felt a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, the driver pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face us. He had a creepy grin on his face, and I knew then that something was terribly wrong. He pulled out a knife and pointed it at us, demanding that we hand over all our valuables. My partner and I were frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. The driver became more aggressive, and I could see the glint of the knife in the moonlight. He was clearly not a legitimate taxi driver, and we were trapped in his car with no way out. My partner tried to reason with him, but the driver was having none of it. He demanded that we hand over our wallets and jewelry, and we complied out of fear for our lives. Then the driver started to become more violent, shouting at us and waving the knife in our faces. We were both terrified and didn't know what to do. I could see my partner trying to reach for his phone, but the driver noticed and snatched it away. We were completely helpless, trapped in the car with a madman. The driver then ordered us to get out of the car and start walking down the road. We had no choice but to comply, hoping that we could somehow escape. As we walked, I could feel the driver's eyes on us, watching our every move. I knew that he was still out there, waiting for us, and the fear was overwhelming. We walked for what felt like hours, trying to find a way back to civilization. But every time we thought we were safe, we would hear the sound of the driver's car approaching. Finally, we came across a police station and ran inside, desperate for help. The police were able to apprehend the driver, and my partner and I were able to go home, shaken but alive. But the experience had changed us both. We no longer felt safe in the city, and we had a newfound respect for the dangers of the world. We couldn't forget what had happened, and we were haunted by the memory of that terrifying night. Years later, we still talk about the incident, and we use it as a reminder to always be vigilant and aware of our surroundings. We know that we were lucky to survive, and we will never forget the horror that we experienced that night. The incident had also brought us closer together, and we realized that we had a deep bond that could never be broken. We had faced our worst fears together and come out stronger for it. But we also knew that there were others out there who weren't as lucky, who had fallen victim to the dangers of the world. And we vowed to do everything in our power to help those in need, to make the world a safer place for everyone. I got the babysitting job through a friend of my mom's. The mom, Lisa, needed someone to watch her two kids, Sam and Ellie, for a few hours a couple nights a week while she worked late shifts. The kids were great. Sam was 9 and loved drawing, and Ellie was 6 and full of energy. Lisa was always nice, too, but I could tell she was stressed. She worked a lot, and I think she was going through a divorce or something. She never said much about it. One night, a little after 8, I had just put Ellie to bed. Sam was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table working on one of his drawings. I was cleaning up when the doorbell rang. It made me jump because no one ever came by this late. I looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there. He looked about Lisa's age, with short dark hair and a beard. He wasn't dressed like a delivery guy or anything, just jeans and a jacket. I didn't open the door. Something about him felt off. Instead, I called through the door, "Can I help you?" "I'm their dad," he said, his voice calm but low. "Lisa told me to come pick up the kids." That made me freeze. Lisa had never mentioned their dad. I didn't even know he was in the picture. I texted her right away, but she didn't respond. I didn't know what to do, so I just said, "I'll have to call Lisa to confirm." His tone changed instantly. "She knows I'm here," he said sharply. "Open the door." I told him again that I needed to check with her, but I was already backing away. My stomach was in knots. Sam was still at the table, watching me. He looked confused but not scared yet. The man banged on the door hard, making Sam flinch. "Open the door," he shouted. "I have a right to see my kids." That's when I grabbed Sam and told him to go upstairs to his room. I didn't want him near the door. I locked it and grabbed my phone to call Lisa, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling 911, but the man must have heard me, because he shouted, "Don't you dare call the cops." He started pounding on the door harder, and I could hear the handle rattling. I was shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I didn't know if the door would hold. Then everything went quiet. I thought maybe he'd left, but I was too scared to check. I told Sam and Ellie to stay in their rooms and locked myself in Lisa's bedroom. I stood there, trying to breathe, and then I heard a noise outside the window. It was faint, like something scraping against the side of the house. I looked out and saw him. He was climbing up the side of the house toward the second floor windows. I panicked and ran to the kids' rooms. Ellie was half asleep, but Sam was wide awake, sitting on his bed, clutching his sketchbook like it could protect him. I told them to stay quiet and follow me. We went into the bathroom and locked the door. It was the only room with no windows. I whispered to Sam to keep Ellie calm while I tried calling the police again. This time, the call went through. I told them everything, my voice shaking so bad I could barely get the words out. The dispatcher said they were sending someone, but it might take a while since we were in a quiet suburban area. The whole time, I could hear footsteps upstairs. He was inside. I didn't know how he got in. Maybe one of the windows was unlocked, or maybe he broke one. All I knew was that he was in the house. I could hear him moving around, opening doors, calling out, "Sam. Ellie. Daddy's here." The way he said it made my skin crawl. He didn't sound like a dad trying to see his kids. He sounded like someone who was enjoying this. I whispered to the kids to stay quiet, but Ellie started to cry. I covered her mouth gently, trying to calm her down. Sam was holding her hand, his face pale. I had no idea what to do. Then the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the bathroom doorknob rattled. I thought I was going to throw up. He knew we were in there. "Open the door," he said, his voice muffled but calm again. I just wanted to talk to them. I didn't answer. I just held onto the kids and prayed the lock would hold. He started pounding on the door, harder and harder, yelling, "Open it. Open the door, now." I grabbed the only thing I could find, a metal towel rack, and held it like a bat. I knew it wouldn't do much, but I had to try. Then I heard the sirens. They were faint at first, but they were getting closer. He must have heard them too, because he stopped pounding. I heard him run down the stairs, and then the front door slammed. I stayed in the bathroom with the kids until the police arrived. When they came in, I could barely talk. I just pointed them upstairs. They didn't find him. Lisa came home a few minutes later, frantic. She hugged the kids and kept apologizing, but I was still too shaken to process everything. Later, she told me the full story. The man was her ex-husband. He'd been abusive, and she had a restraining order against him. He wasn't supposed to come near her or the kids, but he'd been trying to find them for months. I never went back to that house. Lisa said she was moving somewhere safer, but I didn't want to know the details. I just hoped they'd be okay. I was traveling alone, taking a long-distance train route through a string of small towns to visit my sister. It was one of those trips where you have to switch trains at several stations, and it takes forever, but I didn't mind. I had my book, some snacks, and a few hours to kill. It felt peaceful at first, just the sound of the train, the occasional announcement, and the rhythmic sway of the car as it moved along the tracks. It was during my second train that I first noticed him. He was sitting diagonally across from me, not close enough to feel intrusive, but just enough that I could see him clearly. He was dressed in dark clothes, a hoodie pulled low over his face, and he had this stillness about him, like he was trying not to draw attention. That's what made him noticeable, in a way, how deliberate it seemed. At first, I didn't think much of it. A lot of people keep to themselves on trains, especially on long trips. But when I glanced up from my book, I realized he was watching me. Not glancing, not zoning out in my direction, but watching. His head was turned just slightly, his eyes fixed on me. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was staring into space, or maybe it was just a coincidence. I turned back to my book and tried to focus, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. When we reached the next station, I decided to switch cars. It was crowded enough that I could blend in, and I figured I'd just lose him in the shuffle. I got up, grabbed my bag, and walked down the platform to another car. I settled into a new seat and felt a wave of relief. The train started moving again, and for a while, I thought that was the end of it. But when I glanced toward the other end of the car, he was there. Standing near the door, holding onto the rail. His hoodie was still up, and he wasn't looking at me directly, but I knew it was him. That's when I started to feel the panic creeping in. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe he just happened to pick the same car. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. When we stopped at the next station, I decided to switch trains entirely. It wasn't part of my plan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to get away from him. I grabbed my stuff and got off, walking quickly toward the connecting platform. I didn't look back. I boarded the next train and chose a seat in the middle, surrounded by other passengers. I felt safer with people around me. The train pulled out of the station, and I kept an eye on the door, waiting to see if he'd followed. He got on at the last second. I froze when I saw him. He didn't sit down this time. He stood by the door again, holding the rail, his eyes scanning the car until they landed on me. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't do anything. He just stared. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I wanted to tell someone, but what would I even say? A guy looked at me weird. It wasn't like he'd done anything yet. At the next station, I decided to test something. I waited until the last possible moment, then got up and stepped off the train. I walked quickly, weaving through the crowd, and boarded a different train heading in the same direction. When the train started moving, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I'd lost him. Maybe it was all in my head. Then I saw him again. He was sitting farther down the car this time, not looking at me directly but angled just enough that I knew he was aware of me. That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence. He was following me. I felt trapped. I was in the middle of nowhere, on a train with nowhere to go, and this man was stalking me. I thought about getting off at the next stop and trying to find help, but what if he followed me? What if no one was there? I decided to stay put for now, to see what he'd do. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call for help if I needed to. The train ride felt endless. Every time I looked up, he was there, watching. The other passengers were oblivious, lost in their own worlds. When we reached another station, I made my move. I got off and went straight to the station attendant. I told her what was happening, my voice shaking. She looked skeptical at first, but when I pointed him out, her expression changed. "He's been hanging around the station all day," she said quietly. "I'll call security." I waited near her desk, trying to stay calm. I could see him on the platform, pacing now, looking around like he was trying to decide what to do. Security arrived a few minutes later, 2 men in uniforms. They approached him, and I saw the way he tensed up. He didn't run, but he didn't stay either. He walked away, out of the station and into the night. The security guard stayed with me until my next train arrived. I didn't see him again after that, but I couldn't relax until I reached my sister's house. Even then, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to appear. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't want to know. It started with small things. A loaf of bread went missing from the kitchen counter, and I thought maybe one of the kids had taken it to their room. A few cans of soup disappeared from the pantry, but I figured I must have miscounted during grocery shopping. Then there were the noises, soft creaks and shuffles late at night. My husband said it was the house settling, but it didn't feel right. The kids would come into our room some nights, saying they heard someone walking in the hallway. My youngest, Emily, even swore she saw a shadow in her doorway. We brushed it off as nightmares, maybe too much TV before bed, but it stayed in the back of my mind. One night, I stayed up late finishing some work at the dining table. The house was quiet, everyone else was asleep. I got up to grab a glass of water and froze when I heard a noise overhead. It wasn't the usual creak of the attic beams. It was a distinct sound, like someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. I stared at the ceiling, holding my breath, waiting to hear it again. When it came, it was quieter, like whoever or whatever it was had stopped. I convinced myself it was a raccoon or some other animal. We had squirrels in the attic once, and I told myself this was the same thing. The next morning, I asked my husband to check the attic. He climbed up there with a flashlight and a broom, banging around for a while before coming down and shrugging. "Nothing up there," he said. "Probably just the wind." I wanted to believe him, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made me think he hadn't looked very closely. The turning point came a week later. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was woken up by a loud thud from upstairs. My heart was racing before I even opened my eyes. I sat up in bed, straining to hear, but the house was silent again. My husband was snoring beside me, and I didn't want to wake him, so I got up to check on the kids. Emily's room was closest to the attic hatch, and as I passed by her door, I felt a cold draft. I glanced up and froze. The attic hatch was open, the panel slightly ajar. I stood there, staring up at it, my stomach in knots. I told myself it could have shifted on its own, that maybe we'd closed it wrong last time, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I checked on Emily and my older son, Jake. Both were fast asleep. I wanted to shut the hatch and go back to bed, but I couldn't bring myself to get close to it. Instead, I locked the bedroom doors and stayed awake until morning. The next day, I brought it up again to my husband. He brushed it off, said it was just the latch coming loose, but I insisted we check the attic together. We went up, and at first, everything seemed normal. Boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, and the usual dust and cobwebs. But then I noticed something out of place, a blanket rolled up in the far corner, with a pile of wrappers and empty water bottles beside it. My stomach dropped. "What is that?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. We both just stared at it, the realization sinking in. Someone had been living in our attic. We climbed down quickly, locking the hatch behind us. My husband wanted to call the police right away, but I insisted we check the house first, make sure the person wasn't still there. We went room to room, checking every closet, every corner. Nothing. The police arrived within half an hour. They searched the attic and found more signs of someone staying there: old clothes, a small flashlight, even a notebook filled with scribbles. They said it looked like whoever it was had been there for weeks, maybe months. What scared me the most was what they found near the blanket. A small box with a few of our things in it, one of Emily's toys, a photo of our family, and my missing wedding ring. That night, we stayed at my parents' house. I couldn't bear to stay in that house, knowing someone had been watching us, living above us. The police never caught whoever it was. They said the person probably slipped out when we weren't home one day and didn't come back. We moved out a few months later. Even now, I can't walk into a house without checking the attic first. I never thought much about my neighbors. I've lived in the same apartment for a few years now, and the walls are thin, so you get used to the usual noises: people walking, a door slamming, music playing softly through the walls. It's just city life. But then, about a month ago, I started hearing things that made my skin crawl. At first, it was subtle. It would happen late at night, when everything was quiet. I'd be in bed, almost asleep, when I'd hear a soft thudding sound coming from the apartment next door. At first, I thought it was just someone dropping something or moving furniture, but it didn't stop. It would go on for hours, sometimes getting louder, almost like someone was pacing back and forth, but without any real pattern. The noises started getting more disturbing after a while. I started hearing scraping sounds, like something heavy was being dragged across the floor. The sounds were erratic, almost like something was being knocked over, followed by the sound of quick footsteps. I tried to ignore it for a few days, telling myself it was just a neighbor doing something at odd hours, but it started to affect me. I couldn't sleep. The noises were getting too consistent, too strange. One night, around 2 a.m., the sound of dragging and shuffling woke me up again. I had enough by that point. I got dressed, threw on my slippers, and decided to knock on my neighbor's door. I wasn't sure if I should, but I had to ask what was going on. I knocked 3 times, waited a moment, and knocked again. I was about to give up when I finally heard footsteps approaching from the other side. The door opened just a crack, and I saw the face of my neighbor for the first time. He was a man in his early 30s, tall, thin, and wearing a gray hoodie, his eyes wide and a little tired looking. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice a bit shaky, like he was startled. I cleared my throat and said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been hearing strange noises coming from your apartment at night. It's been going on for a while now, and it's making it hard to sleep." He looked at me for a second, and then his face softened, like he was trying to be understanding. "Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's just, I've been moving some stuff around. You know, rearranging things. It's probably just the furniture being shifted." I nodded, not entirely convinced, but I didn't want to push it too hard. "Okay. I just thought I should mention it. It sounds a little strange sometimes, like something's dragging or being knocked over." He smiled awkwardly. "I get it. I'm really sorry. I'll try to keep it down. I'll be more careful with the furniture. Thanks for letting me know." I smiled back, still unsure, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. "All right, thanks. Good night." He shut the door, and I went back to my apartment. That night, the noises didn't come. For a couple of days, things seemed normal. But then, a week later, it started again. This time, it was worse. There was that dragging sound, then what sounded like a heavy object falling to the floor, followed by a weird, muffled thumping. It went on for hours, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was losing sleep, feeling paranoid, and I couldn't get the thought out of my head. What is going on over there? I decided to knock again. It was late, probably around midnight this time. I had barely knocked once when the door opened. He was standing there, still in the same gray hoodie, his eyes wide, but now with a strange, almost nervous energy. "Oh, it's you," he said, sounding surprised but not upset. "Is everything all right?" "I can hear it again," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "The noises. It's still going on. And it's getting worse. I just don't understand what's happening." He shifted his weight uncomfortably and glanced around, like he was looking for an escape. "Yeah, sorry about that. It's just... I've been doing some repairs in the apartment. Fixing stuff, you know? I told you I was moving things around, but I guess it's just louder than I thought." His explanation didn't make any sense. I'd lived here for years, and I knew that building. Repairs don't sound like that. I knew what tools and noises came with repairs, and this wasn't it. There was a weirdness to the way he said it, like he was being evasive, like he didn't want to tell me something. "I'm not sure I believe that," I said slowly. "This isn't just furniture or repairs. It sounds like something's being dragged. Like someone's pacing or..." I said I'm sorry. "I'll do my best to keep it down," he interrupted quickly. "Don't worry about it." I hesitated for a moment, looking at him. He wasn't making eye contact, and his hands were fidgeting in his hoodie pockets. I didn't want to press him further, but I had this sinking feeling that something wasn't right. "Okay," I said, backing away from the door. "But if it doesn't stop, I'll have to let management know. This is becoming a problem." "Of course. I understand. I'll take care of it," he said, still not looking me in the eye. I didn't feel any better. There was something off about him, but I didn't want to escalate it. I walked back to my apartment, but the unease stayed with me. The next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was already late in the evening. I opened the door, and there he was again, standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay with the noise and everything. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I can hear you sometimes through the walls, too, and I didn't mean to disturb you." I felt my heart race. I had only spoken to him twice, yet now he was knocking on my door for no reason, checking on me. It didn't feel right. I took a step back, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm fine. Just, please keep the noise down. I don't need any more late-night disturbances." Of course, he said quickly. But then he added, "If you ever need anything, or if the noise keeps up, you can always come to me. I'm just trying to be a good neighbor." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Thanks, but really, it's fine. Just keep it down." As I closed the door, I could see him standing there, still smiling that weird, forced smile. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me more than a neighbor should. The next few days were a blur, with him showing up uninvited twice more. The first time, he just stood outside my door for a few minutes, then knocked and asked if I was okay. The second time, he lingered in the hallway, pretending to check his mail but glancing at my apartment door every few seconds. It didn't take long for me to realize the noises weren't just random anymore. He was making them. I don't know why or what his intentions were, but I knew that I wasn't going to wait around and find out. I started staying with a friend for a few nights and reported his behavior to the building manager. Eventually, the landlord got involved, and after some investigation, it turned out that the man had a history of strange behavior with previous tenants. I don't know exactly what went down, but after a few weeks, he was moved out. I still live in the same building, but every now and then, I hear noises at night, and I can't help but feel like I'm being watched. I've learned to trust my instincts now, and I always keep my door locked, just in case. I never really thought about automatic car washes until it happened to me. I had just finished a long shift at work and figured I'd get my car washed before heading home. It wasn't the first time I'd been to this place, so I figured it would be a quick and easy stop. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary, especially not what happened that day. The place was one of those drive-through automatic car washes, the kind where you just pull in, put the car in neutral, and let the machines do their thing. There were a few cars ahead of me in line, so I had to wait for my turn. Nothing unusual so far, just sitting there with the engine off, trying to kill time on my phone. Eventually, it was my turn, and I slowly pulled forward into the wash bay. I rolled my windows up, locked the doors, and set my phone down. I'd done this dozens of times before. The car wash started with the usual sounds, the rumbling of the machines, the whoosh of the water spraying down. I wasn't thinking about anything specific, I just sat there, watching the brushes move around my car. Then, just as the machines were about to start scrubbing the sides of the car, I felt a weird sensation. It was like I wasn't alone in the car. At first, I thought it was just the water hitting the windows and the noise of the machines, but something felt off. It was almost like someone was standing right outside my window. I turned my head quickly to the side, trying to shake the feeling. That's when I saw him. A man. He was standing at the driver's side of my car, looking directly at me. I couldn't make out much of his features, just a vague outline of his face and body. His face was pressed up against the window, and he was staring straight at me. It wasn't the kind of look you get from someone casually passing by. It was different. It was intense, almost predatory. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing. It didn't make any sense. The car wash was fully automated. No one was supposed to be outside the car, let alone that close to it. He didn't seem like an employee, and there was no reason for him to be standing there. I tried to ignore him, hoping he would just go away. I focused on the lights from the machines, the noise, anything to distract me. But then I saw it, his hand. He was trying to open the door. Slowly, carefully, as if he knew I was watching. His fingers wrapped around the door handle, and he pulled. I immediately locked the door again, but it was too late. My heart started pounding. I knew something was wrong. Who the hell was this guy? Why was he trying to get into my car? I looked around, but the other cars in the wash bay were too far away for anyone to notice what was going on. I was completely alone, stuck in the narrow passage with this man. I couldn't move. The car wash had already begun, and there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. I looked at the rearview mirror, hoping to see anyone working the machines, but the wash was automated, and I didn't see anybody. The man's hand was still on the door handle. He was pulling again, this time more forcefully. I wasn't sure if he was trying to break in or just see if he could get it open. Either way, I didn't feel safe. I felt like I was in danger. Panic started to set in. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe properly. I started looking for my phone, but I couldn't find it right away. The machines were making so much noise, and I was so focused on what the man was doing that I couldn't think clearly. I finally grabbed my phone, but it took me a few seconds to unlock it. My hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. I dialed 911 as quickly as I could, but the call didn't go through right away. I could feel my heart pounding harder, louder in my chest. The man was still there, still tugging on the door, trying to get in. I could see his face now, his expression getting angrier, like he was frustrated that I wouldn't let him in. Finally, the call connected. The dispatcher asked what the emergency was, and I could barely get the words out. "Someone's trying to break into my car," I said, my voice trembling. I told them where I was, the address of the car wash. I could barely keep my thoughts straight. I didn't even know what to do anymore. The dispatcher told me to stay calm and keep the doors locked. She said someone would be there soon, but I didn't know if I could wait. The man hadn't stopped trying to get in. Every time I looked over, he was still there, trying the door handle, his eyes locked on mine. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the car wash machine started to wind down. The brushes stopped spinning, the water stopped spraying. I was almost done, and the car wash was over. The last thing I needed was for the door to open and the man to get inside. I wasn't sure if he would leave, or if he was planning to do something worse. But as soon as the wash was over and the machine stopped, I saw the man step back, just a few feet from my car. He didn't move toward the door again. He just stood there, staring at me. For a moment, we locked eyes, and I could see the anger in his expression. It wasn't just about getting into the car anymore. It was like he was angry that I hadn't let him in. Without thinking, I shifted the car into drive and pulled out of the wash bay as quickly as I could. I looked behind me and saw the man standing there, still watching, but I didn't look back again after that. I drove straight to the nearest police station, my hands still shaking. The cops couldn't find the man when they checked the car wash, but I wasn't about to take any chances. I gave them a full description, but I didn't feel safe until I was home and locked inside my apartment. I haven't been to that car wash since. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. But I learned a valuable lesson: never be too complacent. Even in the most routine, ordinary situations, you never know who might be watching. I work as a handyman, mostly doing odd jobs for rental properties around the city. Most of my work is pretty standard, fixing leaky faucets, repairing drywall, and replacing light fixtures. Nothing ever out of the ordinary. That is, until I got a call about a new property that needed some attention. The landlord was an older guy, one of those quiet types who never seemed to have much to say. He was friendly enough, but I could tell there was something a little off about the place. The property was an old house, maybe 100 years old or so. It had a certain charm to it, with its creaky wooden floors and faded wallpaper. The landlord had mentioned that the house had been vacant for a while, but that it was now ready to rent out. He just needed me to go in, check a few things, and make sure everything was in working order before the new tenants arrived. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another job. But there was one thing that stuck with me from the start: the basement door. I didn't think much of it at first, just another door in the house, but when I went down to the basement to check the furnace, I noticed something strange. The door was locked. No big deal, right? You expect some doors to be locked in older houses. But when I asked the landlord about it, he seemed to get uncomfortable. "Ah, the basement, it's nothing. Just some old stuff down there," he said, brushing it off. "I wouldn't worry about it." That was the first red flag. He didn't really give me a solid answer, and there was something about the way he said it that felt off. I figured maybe he was just one of those people who didn't want to deal with the old stuff lying around in the basement, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. I went about my work, but that door kept gnawing at the back of my mind. I checked the rest of the house, made the repairs, and kept coming back to that locked door in the basement. Something about it felt wrong, like it was hiding something. I didn't want to pry, but my curiosity kept growing. A couple of weeks went by, and the house was ready to rent. The landlord came by to inspect my work, and everything seemed fine. But I couldn't stop thinking about that locked basement door. I made a mental note to bring it up again, but when I did, the landlord just waved it off. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it," he repeated, almost too quickly. That was when I decided to just let it go. I figured the house was his, and if he didn't want to talk about the basement, it wasn't my place to ask. But deep down, I still couldn't stop thinking about that door. There was something about it that didn't sit right with me. It just felt like there was something hidden behind it, something the landlord didn't want anyone to know. Then, a few days ago, it happened. I got another call from the landlord. He needed me to come by the house to fix a couple of things, nothing major, just a few minor repairs. I was there working when I noticed that something was different. The basement door was no longer locked. The lock was broken. I'm not sure when it happened, but the door was now wide open. I stood there for a second, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to go down there. I had never been down there before, and the thought of it made my stomach turn. But at the same time, I couldn't resist. Something inside me told me I needed to see what was behind that door. I grabbed a flashlight from my toolbox and headed down the stairs into the basement. The air was damp, and the smell of mold hit me immediately. The basement was dark, just a faint light from the staircase casting shadows on the walls. I stepped forward, scanning the room with my flashlight. The space was filled with old furniture, boxes, and what looked like a bunch of junk, nothing too unusual for a basement. But then I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, the floorboards creaking, but then I heard it again. A soft sound, almost like a whisper, coming from the far corner of the room. I froze, holding my breath. The air felt colder, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I took a few cautious steps forward, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer to the corner, I could hear the sound more clearly now. It wasn't a whisper. It was breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. My heart skipped a beat. I turned my head slowly, scanning the dark corner of the basement. The flashlight beam flickered for a moment, and I swore I saw something move, just a shadow, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I took another step forward, then stopped. My mind was racing, and I felt my stomach turn. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what was down here anymore. The breathing was still there, and it was getting louder, like whatever or whoever was in that corner was getting closer. I couldn't leave. I couldn't just walk away, not after all this. I had to find out what was going on. So, with my heart pounding in my chest, I took one more step forward. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, half hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a small door. I hadn't noticed it before. It was a simple wooden door, nothing special about it, but there was something unsettling about it. The sound of breathing was louder now, more distinct, and it was coming from behind that door. It sounded like someone was inside, waiting. I could feel my palms start to sweat, my breath coming in short, shaky gasps. I knew I should turn back. I knew I should just get out of there and never come back. But something was pulling me toward that door, some primal curiosity that I couldn't ignore. Slowly, I reached out and placed my hand on the door. The wood was cold under my fingers, and the moment I touched it, the breathing stopped. The silence was deafening. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with what I should do next. Then, without thinking, I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. The room was small, barely big enough for a person to stand in, and the air inside was thick with dust and mildew. But what stood out the most was what was in the middle of the room, a chair. A worn, old chair, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the straps, the ones tied to the arms and legs of the chair. And the blood. The dark, sticky stains on the floor beneath it. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the room, trying to process what I was seeing. My body felt numb, and my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Who had been down here? And why had the landlord never told me about this? Then, from behind me, I heard the creak of the basement door. Someone was coming down the stairs. I turned, my heart racing, the flashlight clutched in my hand like it was some kind of weapon. But the basement was empty. The door was closed. My stomach twisted as I realized that whoever or whatever had been in that basement with me wasn't gone. It was still there. And it was watching me. I didn't think much of it the first time. It was late, probably close to midnight, when I got off my shift at the diner. The parking lot was mostly empty, just my car and a few others belonging to the night crew from the nearby gas station. I was tired, my feet aching from running orders back and forth all night, and I wasn't paying attention as I unlocked my car. That's when I noticed it. A folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I assumed it was an advertisement, maybe a coupon for an oil change or some other random thing. But when I pulled it out, I realized it wasn't that at all. It was a handwritten note. The paper was thin and crinkled, like it had been folded and unfolded a few times. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, like someone had taken their time with every letter. Good job tonight, my name. You looked beautiful. Can't wait to see you again. I froze. My name. It was right there, clear as day. I looked around the parking lot, half expecting to see someone watching me, but it was empty. Just the dim glow of the streetlights and the hum of the gas station sign flickering in the distance. I shoved the note into my bag and got into my car, locking the doors as soon as I was inside. I told myself it was probably just a prank. Maybe one of the guys from the kitchen thought it would be funny to mess with me. But when I asked the next day, no one admitted to it. They all laughed it off, said it was probably one of our regulars trying to flirt. I wanted to believe that. The second note showed up 3 days later. It was the same kind of paper, folded neatly under my windshield wiper. This one was longer, though, and the tone felt off. You're so kind to everyone. You're different from the others. They don't appreciate you like I do. I see you. I know how hard you work. Again, it was signed with my name, and the handwriting was the same, deliberate and careful, almost like a child's penmanship. This time, I didn't tell anyone. I threw the note away as soon as I got home, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Whoever was leaving these notes knew my name. They knew when I worked. The third note came a week later, and this one scared me. Why didn't you smile at me today? Did I do something wrong? You don't have to be afraid of me, my name. I just want to talk to you. By then, I was on edge. I started parking in different spots every shift, as close to the entrance as possible. I made sure to leave with other coworkers whenever I could, but sometimes that wasn't an option. Sometimes I had to walk to my car alone. I started checking my windshield before I even got close to my car. Most nights, there was nothing there. But then another note would appear, and every time, it got more personal. You look tired tonight. Are you sleeping enough? I worry about you. Your hair looks better when it's down. You shouldn't tie it up so much. I saw you talking to that guy. Do you like him? He's not right for you. That one made me feel sick. I couldn't remember who I had talked to that night, but the idea of someone watching me, analyzing every interaction, was enough to make my skin crawl. I started carrying pepper spray. I even went to the police, but they didn't take me seriously. They told me it was probably just a harmless admirer and that unless the person made a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. By the time the sixth note appeared, I was barely sleeping. I'd see shadows moving outside my apartment windows and jump at every noise. This note was different. It wasn't tucked under my windshield wiper. Instead, it was taped to my car door, right next to the handle. Why are you ignoring me? I thought we had something special. You're hurting my feelings. I don't want to have to do something drastic. That word drastic made my stomach drop. I called out of work the next day. I told my manager everything, and to her credit, she took it seriously. She said she'd make sure someone walked me to my car from now on, and she offered to switch up my shifts to make my schedule less predictable. For a few days, things were quiet. No new notes, no strange shadows, no reason to panic. Then, one night, as I was leaving the diner with Jake, one of the line cooks, I saw him. He was standing across the street, partially hidden by a tree. He wasn't looking directly at me, but I could tell he was watching. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up over his head, and his hands were shoved into his pockets. "Do you see that guy?" I whispered to Jake, nodding in the man's direction. Jake squinted, then nodded. "Yeah. Creepy. Want me to go say something?" I shook my head. "No. Let's just go." We walked to my car together, and I made sure to lock the doors as soon as I was inside. As I drove away, I checked my rearview mirror. The man was still standing there, watching. That was the last time I saw him. The note stopped after that night, and eventually, I stopped looking over my shoulder. But every now and then, when I'm walking to my car in the dark or working a late shift, I feel that same prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone's watching me. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for the right moment to leave another note. The first note was nothing more than a curiosity. I'd moved into this house 3 months ago, drawn to its affordable price and the promise of a quiet neighborhood. The backyard was small but private, bordered by a high wooden fence that separated it from the neighbor's property. I hadn't seen much of the person who lived there, just glimpses of an older man through the slats of the fence when I was out mowing the lawn. He never waved, and I figured he preferred to keep to himself. Fine by me. The note was on plain white paper, folded once and wedged under the bottom edge of the fence. I almost missed it as I was watering the garden one afternoon. Curious, I picked it up and unfolded it. "Keep your dog on your side." I didn't have a dog. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. Maybe the man next door thought my dog, a dog I didn't have, was getting into his yard. But my yard was fully fenced in, and I hadn't seen so much as a stray animal since I moved in. I set the note aside, figuring it wasn't worth the effort to respond. 2 days later, I found another note in the same spot. "Don't think I don't notice what you're doing." That one made me pause. There was no context, no signature. Just those words scrawled in uneven handwriting, as if the person writing it had been shaking. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it must be some sort of misunderstanding. Maybe he thought I was someone else. Still, the uneasy feeling lingered. A week passed without incident, and I started to forget about the notes. Then one evening, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed something sticking out from under the fence again. Another note. "You're not fooling anyone. Stay out of my yard." I wasn't sure what to make of it. I'd never set foot in his yard. I hadn't even tried to peek over the fence. My first instinct was to go knock on his door and clear up whatever confusion he had, but something about the tone of the notes made me hesitate. If he was this paranoid, would showing up at his door make things worse? Instead, I wrote my own note. I kept it short and polite, explaining that I didn't have a dog and had no reason to be in his yard. I slipped it under the fence and went back inside, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next day, there was another note. "Nice try. I know what you're really doing." The words sent a chill down my spine. What did he think I was doing? Why wouldn't he just come talk to me if there was a problem? Over the next week, the notes kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. "I see you watching me. Stay away from my house. Don't think I won't defend myself." By this point, I was locking my doors and double-checking the windows at night. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even inside my own home. One night, I stayed up late, hoping to catch whoever was slipping the notes under the fence. I sat by the window that faced the backyard, the lights off, waiting. Around midnight, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps on the other side of the fence. I held my breath, peering into the darkness. A shadow moved along the fence line. I couldn't see much, just the outline of someone hunched over near the ground. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, they were gone. The next morning, I found the worst note yet. I know you're alone. You won't be for long. I went straight to the police. I brought the notes with me, explained the situation, and even mentioned the shadow I'd seen. The officer I spoke to was polite but not particularly helpful. He said they couldn't do much unless there was a direct threat or evidence of a crime. He suggested installing a security camera and keeping an eye out. So that's what I did. I bought a motion-activated camera and set it up in the backyard, aimed at the fence. The first night it recorded nothing but a raccoon rummaging through the bushes. The second night, the camera caught something, or rather, someone. It was the man next door. The footage showed him creeping along the fence line, slipping a folded piece of paper underneath before disappearing back into the darkness. His movements were slow and deliberate, and even on the grainy footage, I could see how hunched and tense he was. I brought the footage back to the police. This time, they took it more seriously. They sent an officer to talk to my neighbor, but when they knocked on his door, no one answered. The officer told me they'd keep an eye on the situation and advised me to stay vigilant. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining him watching me, lurking just out of sight. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise outside, a faint rustling, like someone brushing against the bushes. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera feed. The screen showed the backyard, dimly lit by the porch light. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, movement. He was standing by the fence, staring directly at the camera. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stood there, staring. Then he raised his hand, and I saw he was holding a piece of paper. He crouched down, slid it under the fence, and walked away. I didn't go outside to get the note until morning. When I finally unfolded it, my hands were shaking. Soon. That was all it said. Just one word, scrawled in the same uneven handwriting. I didn't stick around to find out what he meant. I packed a bag, called a friend, and left that day. The police promised to keep investigating, but as far as I know, nothing ever came of it. I don't know what his problem was, or what he thought I'd done. Maybe he was just lonely, or maybe he was truly dangerous. Either way, I wasn't going to wait to find out. It was supposed to be a relaxing solo getaway. I had booked a room at this small hotel in the mountains, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I wanted some quiet time to read, reflect, maybe take a hike or two. The place was a bit old, but it had good reviews and seemed like the perfect spot for a peaceful retreat. When I checked in, the receptionist, a young woman with pale skin and dark circles under her eyes, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was polite but didn't say much beyond the essentials, like where my room was and what time breakfast was served. It wasn't anything strange, just a bit of a weird vibe. I brushed it off. It was late, and I was tired. I went up to my room, unpacked a little, and decided to take a shower. The water pressure was strong, which was nice. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, I glanced out the window. The view was beautiful, mountains stretching out far and wide. It was everything I had hoped for. I got dressed, made myself some tea, and settled in with a book. I wasn't expecting much excitement, but around 9 p.m., I heard a knock on the door. A soft knock, almost tentative. I figured it was probably just housekeeping, but when I opened it, there was no one in the hallway. I stepped out and looked both ways. Nothing. I shrugged, thinking maybe I had imagined it. I went back inside and locked the door. It wasn't long before I heard another knock, this time louder, more deliberate. I opened the door again, and this time there was a man standing there. He wore a staff uniform, though it was slightly different from the usual hotel attire. His name tag read Eric. "I'm just checking in to make sure everything is all right," he said, his tone calm but distant. I was confused. "Everything is fine, thank you. Is there a problem?" He shook his head, but the way he didn't move, just stood there, made me feel uneasy. "Just making sure you're okay. It's part of our policy to check in with guests late at night, for your safety." I didn't think much of it, though it seemed a bit odd. "All right, well, I'm fine. Thanks." I started to close the door. He didn't move. "I'll be checking back later," he said before walking away. I frowned, watching him disappear around the corner of the hallway. That had been strange, but I figured he was just doing his job, even if the timing was off. I locked the door and went back to my book, though I kept glancing at the clock. It was getting late. An hour passed, and the next thing I knew, there was another knock. My heart rate picked up a little. It was Eric again. I opened the door a crack. "I'm just making sure you're all right," he said, his face slightly closer than before. I could feel his breath. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, closing the door a bit faster this time. This time, I made sure to lock the deadbolt before sitting on the edge of the bed. I felt uneasy, but I tried to calm myself. Maybe this was just an overzealous employee, or some weird hotel policy. Whatever it was, I wasn't sure, but it was creeping me out. It wasn't long before there was another knock, this time more insistent. I jumped up, heart racing, and opened the door again. Eric was standing there again. This time, he didn't smile, and his eyes seemed almost empty. "I need to check on you again," he said, his voice softer, almost a whisper. "No," I said, standing firm, feeling a surge of fear. "I'm fine. You've already checked. Please leave me alone." He didn't move. "I'm just making sure you're safe." I stepped back. "I'm safe. I don't need you to check on me again." For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. His expression was unreadable. I quickly slammed the door shut and locked it again. This time, I felt a rush of panic. I called the front desk, my hands trembling. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's someone here, one of your employees. He keeps knocking on my door late at night, saying he's checking on me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, the receptionist spoke. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but no one is scheduled to check on guests tonight." That sent a chill down my spine. "He's in a uniform," I said, my voice shaking. "His name is Eric. He's been knocking on my door for hours." Another pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll send someone up right away to check on it." I didn't feel reassured. In fact, I felt even more anxious. Why had they said no one was scheduled for that, if I had seen Eric with my own eyes? I waited, eyes fixed on the door. I tried to calm myself, but the moments stretched on. Minutes turned to half an hour. There was no knock. No staff member came to my door. Eventually, I grew brave enough to venture out into the hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. I moved cautiously toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. As I passed the reception area, I noticed the receptionist was nowhere to be found. The lobby was empty. I ran to the back exit, my heart pounding. My car was parked outside. I didn't know what was going on, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. As I reached the exit, I glanced back up at the window to my room. The curtains were drawn open. And there, standing right behind the glass, was Eric, his face pressed up against the window. I rushed to my car, hands shaking as I started the engine. I didn't look back. I didn't care if the hotel was just a few miles out of the city. I wasn't going to stay there for another minute. I drove for what felt like hours, only stopping when I reached a well-lit, crowded highway. I never went back to that hotel. I don't know what would have happened if I stayed, but I'm pretty sure Eric wasn't really there to check on me. I never thought much about picking up hitchhikers, but it was late, and the rain had started coming down hard. I was driving back from a business trip, and I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The roads were quiet, and I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me because of the rain. Then, on the side of the road, I saw him just standing there, drenched, thumb out, staring into the headlights. I debated for a second. Normally, I wouldn't stop, but something made me pull over. Maybe it was the way he looked. He seemed harmless, just a guy in his mid-30s, with a rain-soaked jacket and a tired face. I rolled down the window a bit. "You need a ride?" I asked. He nodded quickly, stepping toward the car. "Yeah, please. I've been waiting for a while." I unlocked the door, and he slid in. He thanked me as he shut the door, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Just past Clearwater," he said, looking out the window. "I'll get off soon. Just need to get out of the rain." "Clearwater?" "That's a couple hours away," I said, but I didn't mind. It was getting late, and I'd rather have some company on the road than not. We were the only two cars on the highway, and the rain wasn't showing any sign of stopping. "Yeah," he said, looking back at me. "I've got a friend out there. He's expecting me." His voice was calm, maybe a bit too calm for someone who had just been standing out in the pouring rain for who knows how long. I nodded and kept driving. For the next 20 minutes, there was silence between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, but there was something strange about him. He didn't seem to mind the quiet, and every so often, I'd catch him looking at me, like he was studying me. "You from around here?" he asked after a while. "No, just passing through," I replied. "Work trip?" He nodded slowly, his eyes drifting back to the window. "Yeah, me too. Just passing through. Gotta get somewhere important." I didn't know why, but something about that made me uneasy. It was like the way he said it, like he was hiding something. I kept my focus on the road, trying not to let my mind wander. After about another 10 minutes, I heard him shift in his seat. I glanced over and saw him looking at me, but his expression was different now. Harder. It wasn't that friendly face anymore. His eyes were cold. "You know," he said, his voice low, "you didn't really have to stop, you know. You didn't have to pick me up." I felt a little chill run down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. "You looked like you needed help," I said, glancing at him for a second before focusing back on the road. "I don't need anyone's help," he said, and now there was a sharpness to his voice. It wasn't the same person who had gotten into the car a while ago. "I just needed a ride, and now I'm stuck with you." I didn't know what to say. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was just a little too tired or maybe he'd had a rough day. "It's all right," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Just trying to be friendly. He didn't respond. The air in the car had shifted. It wasn't the rain anymore, but something about the way he was sitting in his seat, his eyes locked on me, made the car feel smaller. He was still staring at me, unblinking. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "You should probably get out when we hit the next exit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't move. Didn't say a word for a long time. I glanced at him, just as the headlights cut through the rain. "Hey," I said. Before I could finish, he suddenly reached forward, grabbing the door handle like he was about to throw it open. I swerved to the side, almost hitting the guardrail. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to regain control of the car. "Stop!" I yelled, my voice shaking now. He let go of the handle, but he was still staring at me, his face twisted into something I couldn't quite read. "You think I'm just gonna let you tell me what to do? You think I'm just gonna get out when you say so?" The rain was pounding harder now, and the headlights barely cut through it. I tried to focus on the road, my hands slipping on the wheel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said, my voice shaky. "You're not as nice as you think," he muttered. "You pick me up, so you deal with me now." I was starting to panic, but I tried not to show it. I didn't want to make him angrier. "I'll pull over at the next exit," I said. "You can get out there." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his seat and chuckled. It wasn't a laugh, it was a low, eerie sound, like he was mocking me. "You think I'm gonna get out? After all this?" I looked at him again, this time fully aware of the danger. He wasn't planning on leaving. I knew it then, but I wasn't sure what to do. "You need to get out," I said again, my voice firm, but my heart was racing. But now he just grinned. It was a slow, deliberate smile, and something in it made me want to vomit. "You don't get it, do you?" "I'm not getting out," he said. I was trembling now, but I wasn't about to let him have control. I quickly reached for my phone, planning to call for help, but before I could do anything, he reached across the seat and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were like iron, digging into my skin. "You can't just call someone," he hissed. I yanked my wrist away, my mind racing. I had to think fast. I couldn't let him control this situation. I focused on the road, trying to remain calm, even though panic was rising inside me. I remembered the gun I kept in the glove box. I had never used it, but I had it there for situations like this. He must have seen the shift in my expression because he leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "You think that'll help?" he whispered, his breath hot and rank in my face. But before I could react, I saw the lights of another car in the distance. Relief flooded me, and for a split second, I thought I might get out of this alive. The car was close, and I steered toward it. My foot slammed on the gas, and I cut across 2 lanes to get behind the other vehicle. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the hitchhiker still watching me, his eyes burning into the back of my skull. I wasn't safe yet, but I was getting closer. I couldn't go back to the road we'd been on, but I could keep driving. I had to keep driving, away from him, away from whatever the hell he had planned. When I finally found a gas station and stopped, I jumped out of the car, locked the doors, and ran inside. I didn't stop until I was inside, safe. The stranger never followed me inside, but I swear I saw him standing outside in the rain, watching me through the window. It was a little after midnight when I got to the gym. I had a long day at work, and I wanted to blow off some steam. The place was mostly empty, which wasn't unusual for that time. There was one guy on a treadmill when I arrived, but he left after about 20 minutes. By then, it was just me. I liked the quiet. I didn't have to wait for machines, and I didn't have to deal with anyone taking up space by scrolling on their phone. The gym wasn't huge, just a single floor with a weight section in one corner and cardio machines in another. The locker rooms were in the back, and there was a staff desk near the entrance. I did my usual routine, some bench presses, a bit of time on the rowing machine, and a lot of focus on the free weights. I lost track of time, like I always do. It was probably close to 2 a.m. when I decided to wrap up. My arms were sore, and I figured I'd done enough for the night. When I grabbed my water bottle and towel, I noticed the place was eerily quiet. More than usual. I hadn't seen the staff member in a while, but I didn't think much of it. Sometimes they'd step out for a small core to grab something from the back office. I walked to the front door, but when I pushed, it didn't budge. It was one of those heavy glass doors with a magnetic lock that needed a keycard to open. I assumed my keycard just hadn't scanned properly, so I swiped it again. The reader beeped, but the door stayed shut. I tried a few more times, each swipe followed by the same beep, but the lock didn't release. I looked around for the staff member, but the desk was empty. I knocked on the door in case they were outside. No one came. My phone was in my gym bag, so I pulled it out to call the number posted near the desk. It rang a few times, then went to voicemail. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. That's when I started feeling uneasy. I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe the system was down, and the staff had stepped out. I tried to stay calm. I figured I'd wait a bit and they'd come back. I sat on one of the benches near the free weights and scrolled through my phone to distract myself. That's when I heard it. It was faint at first, almost like I imagined it. A heavy breath, slow and deliberate. It came from somewhere near the back of the gym. I froze, straining my ears to listen. For a moment, there was nothing, just the hum of the air conditioning. Then it came again. Louder this time. I turned toward the sound, staring into the dark corner near the locker rooms. The lights in that area were dimmer than the rest of the gym, but I could just make out the shapes of the lockers and the doorway leading to the bathrooms. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. Just silence. I stood up, every muscle in my body tensed. I told myself it was probably just the air vents or something falling over in the locker room. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I took a few steps toward the back, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "Is someone there?" I asked. This time, I heard movement. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. They echoed through the empty gym, coming from the direction of the locker rooms. I backed up, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes darted around, looking for something to defend myself with. The best I could find was one of the metal dumbbells. I grabbed it, the cold weight steadying my shaking hands. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was a staff member playing a prank. Maybe someone had snuck in and was messing with me. Or maybe it was something worse. I stayed frozen, staring at the dark corner. Then I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A laugh. Low and quiet, almost a chuckle. It didn't sound right. There was no humor in it, just something wrong. I backed away, keeping the dumbbell raised in front of me. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice cracking. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The call connected, and I told the operator what was happening. They said they'd send someone, but it might take a while since I was in a more remote area of the city. I kept the operator on the line as I moved toward the front of the gym. I could still see the dark corner out of the corner of my eye, but whoever was there hadn't moved again. The operator told me to stay on the line and try to find a safe place to wait. The staff desk had a small storage cabinet underneath. I crouched down and wedged myself inside, trying to make as little noise as possible. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, whispering updates to the operator. Then the footsteps started again. Slow and steady, moving closer to the front of the gym. I clutched the dumbbell tighter, my breath shallow and fast. The operator was saying something, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could hear was the sound of those steps. They stopped right in front of the desk. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't look down and see me. My pulse was so loud in my ears that I was sure they could hear it. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. They headed toward the glass doors. I peeked out from the cabinet, just enough to see a figure standing there. The light from the street lamps outside cast their shadow across the floor. They stood there for a moment, their back to me. Then they turned their heads slightly, like they were listening for something. I ducked back into the cabinet, squeezing my eyes shut. A loud bang echoed through the gym. I jumped, hitting my head on the top of the cabinet. It was the front door. The figure was slamming their shoulder against it, trying to break it open. I told the operator what was happening, my voice barely more than a whisper. They assured me the police were on their way. The banging stopped, and the silence was worse than the noise. I waited, every muscle in my body tensed. Then I heard the footsteps again, this time moving toward the weight section. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the silence. The figure froze, then bolted toward the back of the gym. I stayed in the cabinet until I heard the sound of voices calling out, telling me it was safe to come out. The police found no one in the gym. Whoever it was must have slipped out through an emergency exit before they arrived. They checked the security footage, but the cameras in the back corner had been tampered with. I haven't been back to that gym since. I canceled my membership the next day. Now, every time I hear footsteps behind me, I feel that same icy fear, like they're still there, just waiting. I still can't shake off what happened that weekend. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, just a couple of days in the woods with a few friends, nothing special. A chance to get away from the hustle, enjoy some fresh air, and have a break from the usual grind. I'd been hiking a few times before, so I knew what to expect. But that weekend, it turned into something completely different. We drove up on Friday afternoon, just as the sun was starting to set. There were 5 of us, me, my brother James, his girlfriend Sarah, and 2 of our friends, Dan and Laura. We found a spot deep in the woods, far enough away from any major trails. It was quiet, peaceful, just how we wanted it. We set up camp, built a fire, and spent the evening talking, laughing, and drinking beers. We didn't think about much, just enjoying the moment. Saturday was pretty uneventful. We hiked, explored a bit, and spent the day relaxing by the river. We had a good dinner, played some card games, and then went to bed early because we were all exhausted from the hike. The night was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence you can only get when you're far away from city noise. We fell asleep with no problems at all. But when we woke up on Sunday morning, everything felt off. The weather was fine, but there was something in the air that made me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it. The others didn't seem to notice, though. We packed up our things, folded the tents, and were about ready to head back to the car. That's when things started to go wrong. We had parked the car just off the main road, about a quarter of a mile from our campsite. It was tucked into a small clearing, hidden enough that we didn't worry about it being visible from the main trail. We all made our way back down the path, talking and laughing, until we came to the clearing. That's when we saw it. The car looked fine from a distance, but as we got closer, I noticed something. The tires. Every single one of them was slashed. Flat as a pancake. And as I walked around the back, I saw the engine hood was open. My heart started to race. I looked at James, who looked just as confused as I felt. "Who the hell would do this?" he muttered, walking toward the hood. I didn't know what to say. It was just wrong. Why would anyone be out here? The place we were camping wasn't exactly easy to get to. It wasn't like someone could just casually wander by. We hadn't seen anyone else on the trails the whole time we were there. It didn't make any sense. James looked under the hood, poking around. "It's tampered with. Someone's been messing with the engine. There's no way this happened overnight." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "What do you think happened?" "I don't know," he said, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "But it's not good. I think we're stuck here." "Stuck?" Dan said, his voice rising. "You're telling me we're stuck out here? How?" "We're miles from the nearest town. We can't just walk back." We all stood there, staring at the car in disbelief. I could see the panic creeping into everyone's faces. It was supposed to be a simple trip. We were supposed to drive back and enjoy the rest of the day. But now, we were stranded. And someone had clearly done this on purpose. "We need to call for help," I said, trying to keep calm, even though I could feel my own nerves starting to fray. "Maybe someone can come get us." "Good luck with that," Laura said, holding up her phone. "There's no signal out here. Remember?" She was right. We hadn't had any reception since we started the hike, and now there was no way to contact anyone. It was just the five of us, stuck in the middle of nowhere. I paced around the car, trying to think. There had to be something we could do. But when I looked at the damage again, it became clear someone had deliberately destroyed the car. The tires were slashed clean through. The engine was messed with in a way that made it obvious it wasn't some random vandal. This was intentional. Someone wanted us stuck here. I felt the air grow heavier, like the forest around us was closing in. The peaceful getaway had turned into something darker. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of whoever had done this still being nearby, watching us, waiting. "We need to figure out what to do," James said. "We can't just sit here." "We could try to hike out," I suggested. "It's not far to the road. Maybe we can flag someone down, get a tow truck or something." But no one seemed too keen on that idea. It was starting to get late in the afternoon, and we were already exhausted from the hike the day before. None of us were in any condition to walk the distance, especially with the heavy feeling hanging over us. No one said it, but we all knew it. It wasn't just the car that was messed up. Something was wrong here. Someone had gone out of their way to trap us. We sat around the car for a while, trying to figure out what to do next. It felt like every second that passed, the weight of the situation just kept getting heavier. The trees around us, once just part of a nice forest, now seemed to press in closer. The whole world felt quieter, like we were being watched, even though we didn't see anything out of place. Then, just as we were starting to talk about maybe going on foot, we heard something. A noise. A branch snapping in the woods. We all froze. Everyone turned to look, their eyes wide with the same realization. We weren't alone. For what felt like forever, we stood there, barely breathing, listening. But the noise didn't come again. It could have been an animal, just the wind, or maybe a trick of the mind. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that we had no way out. No way to know who or what had done this to us. We made a decision then, even though it felt impossible. We would try to walk out. Stick together. The whole time, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the leaves felt like someone was getting closer. It wasn't an easy hike out. It was a long, exhausting trek, made worse by the growing sense of fear that hung over us. But we finally made it to a place where we could get a signal on our phones, and after what felt like hours, we managed to get through to someone who could help. They showed up and towed us back to town. We didn't look back at the woods as we drove away. None of us said much during the ride. We were all just too shaken. To this day, I still don't know who did it or why, but I can't shake the feeling that we were being watched the whole time. We got out safe, yes. But something about that weekend, it wasn't just the car. It was the feeling that we were never meant to leave. It started as just a way to clear my head. I had a long day, and the rain was light enough to make running feel refreshing. I liked the sound of it, the way it drowned out everything else. The trail I usually took was quieter in weather like this, and I thought I'd have it all to myself. The park was mostly empty when I arrived. I remember seeing only one other car in the lot, an old sedan with muddy tires. I didn't think much of it. People came and went, and it wasn't unusual for someone to leave their car there overnight. The path was slick, but I didn't mind. It was one of those nights where everything felt calm, even with the rain picking up. The trees bent low, heavy with water, and the lights along the trail barely cut through the dark. I ran slower than usual, careful on the wet pavement. I'd gone about a mile in when it happened. My foot slipped on a patch of mud that had washed onto the path, and I went down hard. My ankle twisted under me, and the pain was sharp and immediate. I sat there, clutching it, feeling the cold seep through my leggings. The rain wasn't refreshing anymore. It was soaking through my jacket and making me shiver. I tried to stand, but my ankle buckled. It wasn't broken, but I couldn't put weight on it. My phone was back in the car. I hadn't thought I'd need it for a short run. I felt stupid and helpless sitting there in the rain. That's when I heard footsteps. At first, I thought I'd imagined them, but they got louder, closer. A man came around the bend, wearing a dark jacket with the hood pulled up. He slowed when he saw me, stopping a few feet away. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "I think I twisted my ankle," I said. "I can't walk on it." He didn't respond right away, just stood there looking at me. His hood shadowed most of his face, but I could see his mouth, a thin line, not smiling. "Need help?" he asked after a long pause. "Yeah," I said, relief flooding through me. "If you could help me back to the parking lot, I'd really appreciate it." He didn't move. "No one else out here," he said, more to himself than to me. Bad night to be running. I didn't like the way he said it. There was no warmth in his tone, no concern. Just an observation, flat and detached. "I didn't think it'd get this bad," I said, trying to keep the conversation normal. "The rain, I mean." He stepped closer, and I instinctively leaned back. He crouched down, his face level with mine now. His eyes were dark, and there was something in them that made my stomach twist. He wasn't looking at my ankle. He was looking at me. "You're hurt pretty bad," he said, his voice quieter now. "Can't go anywhere like that." "I just need to get to my car," I said, my voice a little unsteady. "It's not far." He reached out suddenly, grabbing my ankle. I flinched, the pain shooting up my leg. "Doesn't look broken," he said, as if I hadn't already figured that out. His grip was too tight, and his fingers felt cold even through my wet clothes. "I'm fine," I said, pulling my leg away. "I just need help walking." He stood up, towering over me now. "I could carry you," he said, like it was the most logical thing in the world. "No, that's okay," I said quickly. "If you could just let me lean on you, that'd be enough." He didn't move. He was staring at me again, and I realized he hadn't blinked the whole time. The rain dripped from his hood, sliding down his face. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. "Not safe." Something about the way he said it felt wrong, like he wasn't talking about the weather or the trail. My heart was pounding now, the cold and the rain forgotten. I tried to push myself up, but my ankle gave out again, and I fell back with a gasp. "Stay still," he said sharply. "You'll hurt yourself more." I didn't like the way he said it, like he was scolding me. I didn't like anything about him. I forced a smile, trying to keep things calm. "Thanks for stopping," I said, my voice shaking. "But I think I'll just wait here until someone else comes by." "No one else is coming," he said, almost casually. "Not this late." My stomach dropped. I hadn't even thought about the time. It was past 9, and the park closed at 10. He was probably right. No one else would be out here in this weather. He crouched down again, closer this time. "Let me help you," he said, his tone softer now. "You'll catch your death sitting here." Something in me snapped. I couldn't just sit there waiting for whatever he had planned. I grabbed a branch that had fallen nearby and held it up, the bark rough against my hands. "Stay back," I said, my voice firm. He didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed amused. "What are you going to do with that?" he asked, tilting his head. I didn't answer. My hands were trembling, but I kept the branch between us. The rain was coming down harder now, the wind cutting through my wet clothes. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't care. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, standing up again. "I'm just trying to help." "I don't need your help," I said, edging back toward the trees. "Just leave me alone." He took a step forward, and I swung the branch, missing by inches. "Hey," he snapped, his voice angry now. "What's your problem?" I didn't wait for him to close the distance. I pushed myself up, leaning on the trees for support, and started limping away as fast as I could. My ankle screamed with every step, but I didn't care. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps faster than mine. "Come back," he shouted. "You're gonna get yourself killed out here." I didn't look back. The parking lot wasn't far. If I could just make it there, maybe someone would be pulling in or leaving. The path curved, and I lost sight of him for a moment. I pushed myself harder, my breath coming in gasps. When I reached the lot, it was empty except for my car and the old sedan I'd seen earlier. My car was too far to make it, but the sedan was close. I ran to it, banging on the window. "Help. Please." The door opened, and an older woman leaned out, her eyes wide with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked. "There's a man," I said, barely able to get the words out. "He's following me." She didn't hesitate. She opened the passenger door and helped me inside, locking it behind me. We watched the path together, but he never came out. I don't know if he gave up or if he was hiding, waiting for the next person to come along. The woman drove me to a nearby gas station, where I called for help. The police searched the park but didn't find anyone. They said it was probably just a misunderstanding, but I knew better. It's hard to describe the kind of fear that settled in the pit of my stomach that night, but I'll try. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special, just another long workday that dragged on forever. Around 8 p.m., the city was plunged into darkness. No lights, no street lamps, nothing. The whole place went quiet, except for the usual sounds of people moving around, shouting, cars honking, but that faded too. The whole block went silent, like everyone was holding their breath. I could hear my heartbeat loud in my ears. I had been at home by myself, nothing out of the ordinary. My roommate had gone out of town for a few days, so I was alone in the apartment. I didn't think much about it, just grabbed a flashlight and set it down on the table to be ready in case the blackout lasted longer than expected. It was a hot summer evening, and the AC was out, so it felt like the walls of the apartment were closing in. I sat by the window for a while, hoping the lights would come back on, but nothing changed. Everything was still dark. I was starting to get a little frustrated, pacing around. I needed to check on my phone for updates, but of course, the service was spotty. Just as I was about to get up and go to the kitchen, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. At first, I thought maybe it was just the sound of my own nerves, like the air itself was heavy. But then I realized it wasn't from the hallway or outside. It was coming from inside my apartment. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood still for a moment, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped, then started again. Slow, deliberate, like whoever it was didn't care whether I could hear them or not. I froze. My mind raced. Was it possible that someone had gotten in during the blackout? The door was locked. I always made sure it was, especially with the city being as crazy as it was during blackouts. No one had knocked, no one had called. I hadn't heard a thing until the footsteps. The silence that followed was deafening. All I could hear was the sound of my own breath and the pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. If it was someone trying to rob me, they probably hadn't expected anyone to be home. But I wasn't about to just sit there like a sitting duck. I grabbed the flashlight and pressed my back to the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I barely dared to breathe. I could hear the faint sound of shuffling feet, moving slowly. I couldn't tell which direction they were coming from, but they were getting closer. I waited, hoping it was some kind of mistake, maybe just the wind. But the footsteps didn't stop. I wanted to call 911. I really did. But I wasn't sure if I should. The blackout meant no phones were working properly, and I didn't know if anyone would even hear me. If someone was in my apartment, I didn't want to give away my position by talking on the phone. The seconds felt like hours, stretching out in a way I couldn't explain. I could hear the footsteps now, closer right outside my room. I swallowed hard, trying not to make any noise. They were getting closer, and I couldn't think straight. My pulse was racing. That's when the flashlight flickered. I cursed under my breath, praying it wouldn't die completely. I didn't dare move to check the batteries. If the flashlight went out, I'd be in complete darkness, and that thought was worse than any other. My senses were on high alert. Every sound seemed amplified. I could hear my breath rasping, my hands trembling around the flashlight. I had to act. I moved quickly, staying low and as quiet as I could. I didn't know where the footsteps had gone, but I didn't want to risk staying in the open. I crept down the hallway toward the kitchen. The flashlight beam was barely enough to guide me, but it was something. I checked the back door to see if I could slip out unnoticed, but it was locked. Not a chance of getting out without being seen. I felt a surge of panic. Was this a mistake? Should I have called someone sooner? Was I being too paranoid? Just as I was about to turn back to the front door, I heard it again. This time, it was clearer, the sound of someone breathing. Not far from where I was. I froze again. The breath was heavy, deliberate, like whoever it was just waiting, listening for me. My blood turned cold. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't let them know I knew. I had to figure out what was going on, but I couldn't let myself get caught. I moved silently into the kitchen, my eyes darting around, trying to think. I knew the layout of my apartment like the back of my hand, but tonight, it felt like a maze. I didn't know if I'd make it to the phone in time or if I'd even be able to use it. I moved toward the drawer where I kept a knife. Not to fight, but to feel safe. I didn't even know what I was thinking. Maybe I was just trying to give myself some courage. That's when the door to my bedroom creaked open. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but I stayed still, keeping my breath shallow. Whoever it was moving around. They were getting closer, and I had no idea what they wanted. Maybe they were looking for something, or maybe they were just here to harm me. I don't know how long I stood there, waiting, trying to keep quiet. My mind raced. What was going on? How had someone gotten in without me hearing them? What did they want from me? And then, just as suddenly as the steps had started, they stopped. Completely. I didn't know whether to breathe a sigh of relief or to stay hidden. The silence was maddening, but I dared not make a sound. I didn't even want to move, in case it made a noise. I waited. Minutes passed. I don't know how long, but it felt like hours. Finally, I made my way to the front door, grabbing my keys. I couldn't stay here any longer. I bolted out into the street, finally feeling the fresh air hit my face. I stood there, just outside my apartment, and didn't move for a while. I didn't know if it was safe to go back inside or if whoever had been in there had left. Eventually, the lights flickered back on, but I didn't go back in right away. Instead, I walked to the nearest open store, where I called my friend and told them what had happened. I was a mess, shaking, barely able to speak without feeling like I might collapse. I don't know if I was overreacting, but I didn't care anymore. I knew something had happened, and I couldn't risk going back in there alone. The police arrived shortly after I called them, but by then, there was nothing to find. No sign of forced entry, no sign of anyone having been in my apartment. The officer assured me it was probably just a weird coincidence, maybe something in the building's wiring that made strange sounds or the blackout playing tricks. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, that they had been in my apartment, watching me. I don't know what happened that night, and I probably won't ever find out. But after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I moved out of that apartment the very next week. I couldn't live there anymore, not after hearing those steps, those breaths, knowing someone had been in my home, whether they had meant to hurt me or not. We decided to go hiking on a Friday. It was supposed to be a simple weekend trip, just four of us, me, Danny, Claire, and Joel. The trail was tucked deep in the woods, far from any towns or cell service. Joel picked it because it was supposed to have some amazing views, and we were all up for an adventure. We packed our gear, food, and tents, ready for 2 nights of camping. The first day was fine. The trail was narrow, winding through dense trees, with little clearings where we'd stop for water or a quick snack. We laughed, took pictures, and talked about how nice it was to be away from everything. Danny was the jokester of the group, always messing around and teasing Claire about her fear of bugs. By the time we made it to the first campsite, the sun was setting. We set up our tents, made a small fire, and ate while the sky turned dark. That night, as we sat around the fire, we thought we heard something in the woods. It was faint, like a twig snapping, but it made us all stop talking. Joel said it was probably an animal, maybe a deer. We laughed it off, but I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no crickets, just the occasional rustling of leaves. The next morning, Danny was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his boots were gone, and so was his backpack. At first, we thought he'd just gone to use the bathroom or explore, but as the hours passed, we started to worry. Joel and I searched the area, calling his name, while Claire stayed by the camp in case he came back. There was no sign of him. No footprints, no gear left behind, nothing. By midday, Joel suggested we pack up and head back to the car. He said maybe Danny had gotten lost and somehow found his way back to the trailhead. Claire was panicking, saying we should call for help, but our phones didn't have any signal. We agreed to hike back, figuring we could alert someone once we were closer to town. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, but every time I turned, there was nothing there. The trail felt different on the way back, like the trees had closed in. Joel noticed it too. He kept checking the map, muttering that it didn't make sense. The path seemed longer, or maybe we were just more on edge. Then we found the first clue. A water bottle, half full, sitting on the edge of the trail. It was Danny's. He had a specific brand he always carried. Claire picked it up and started crying, saying he must have come this way. But why would he leave it behind? Joel tried to stay calm, saying it could have fallen out of his bag. An hour later, we found his bandana tied to a low branch. That was when Joel started to get nervous. "This isn't right," he said. He wouldn't just leave his stuff like this. We decided to keep moving, faster this time, but the trail seemed to stretch on forever. Around dusk, we found his boot. Just one, lying in the middle of the path. The laces were still tied, but it was dirty, like it had been dragged through the mud. Claire broke down again, saying we needed to stop and wait for Danny. Joel and I argued with her, saying it was safer to keep going. We didn't want to be stuck out there another night. That was when we noticed something. The boot had marks on it, like it had been scratched or clawed at. But they weren't from an animal. They were too deliberate, too clean. Joel and I exchanged a look but didn't say anything to Claire. We just told her to keep moving. As the sun went down, we found more clues. A ripped strap from Danny's backpack, a trail of granola spilling across the dirt. Each piece felt like a breadcrumb, like someone was leading us somewhere. I started to hear things, branches snapping, leaves rustling, but every time I turned, the woods were empty. Joel was tense, his hand gripping the strap of his pack like he was ready to swing it at someone. We decided to stop for the night when it got too dark to see. Claire was a mess, whispering that something was wrong, that we should have stayed at the first campsite. Joel tried to reassure her, but I could see the fear in his eyes. None of us slept. We just sat there, listening to the forest. Around midnight, I saw movement. Just a shadow darting between the trees. I nudged Joel, and he saw it too. We didn't wake Claire, not wanting to scare her more, but we stayed up, gripping sticks like they were weapons. The shadow didn't come closer, but it didn't leave either. It just circled us, staying just out of reach. By dawn, we were ready to run. We packed up as quickly as we could, dragging Claire along as she sobbed. The trail was easier to follow in the daylight, but the woods felt wrong, like they were watching us. Then we found Danny's other boot. It was on the trail, facing us, like it had been placed there. Joel picked it up and froze. Inside was a piece of paper, folded tightly. He opened it, and his face went pale. I grabbed it from him and read the message. It was written in blocky, uneven letters. "You're next." That was it. We ran. We didn't care about staying quiet or conserving energy. We just ran, crashing through the underbrush when the trail twisted too much. I didn't look back, not even when I heard Claire scream. Joel stopped to help her up, but I kept going, yelling for them to hurry. We made it back to the car just as the sun was setting. The lot was empty, and Danny's car was still there, untouched. We piled into Joel's car and sped out of there, not saying a word until we hit the main road. We reported everything to the police, but they didn't find anything. No sign of Danny, no evidence on the trail. It was like he had vanished. They said it was probably an animal attack or that he'd gotten lost, but I know that's not true. Someone was out there, watching us, leading us, playing with us. And they're still out there. It was a Saturday morning when my fiancée and I decided to go check out this house we found online. The listing looked great, spacious, affordable, and in a decent area. We had been looking for a while, and everything about this house seemed perfect. The listing photos were all bright, airy rooms, and the backyard was exactly what we wanted. I was excited, and my fiancée, Sarah, was too. We were getting serious about settling down, and this place could be the one. We arrived at the address a little early, parked, and waited in the car for a few minutes. It wasn't a very busy area. Just a quiet street with houses spaced out, a little too quiet for my taste, but it didn't bother me. We went up to the front door, and I rang the bell. I looked around while we waited for the realtor. The house itself was nice from the outside, big, with a porch, a two-car garage. A couple of bushes near the front door, a few trees around the yard. The kind of house you could see yourself living in. The door opened after a few moments, but no one was there. I thought maybe the realtor had just been in the back, getting ready or something. I stepped forward and looked inside. The house was dark inside. There were no lights on, but the door was open just wide enough for me to see the hallway. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I looked at Sarah, who was standing next to me. "Maybe we're early," she suggested. I shrugged. "Could be. I'll wait a couple minutes." We both stood there in the silence, waiting for someone to come to the door. But after another minute or so, I started to get the feeling something wasn't quite right. It wasn't like the place was abandoned. The door was unlocked, but the house still had furniture in it, like it was ready for showings. I was about to turn around and call the real estate agency when I heard a noise inside, faint footsteps, like someone moving in the other room. "Hello?" I called again, a little louder this time. Nothing. I pushed the door open slightly and peeked inside. The house was old, but clean, well maintained. There were a few pieces of furniture scattered around, a couch here, a coffee table there, but it looked like it had been staged for a showing. Nothing too personal or too lived in. Just the bare essentials to make it look homey. But still, it felt off. I stepped inside and looked around. The air smelled faintly of something sweet, like cinnamon, but it felt stale, almost like no one had been in the house for a while. I glanced over at Sarah, who was still standing by the door, looking hesitant. "We should go back to the car and call the agency," Sarah said, looking uneasy. Maybe they forgot about the appointment. Before I could respond, I heard it again, the soft sound of footsteps, coming from upstairs this time. "Did you hear that?" I asked, turning to Sarah. She nodded, wide-eyed. "I'm not going upstairs alone," she said, voice trembling. "Neither am I," I replied. But I wasn't sure what to do next. We could leave, but something about the situation had me frozen, like I couldn't quite put my finger on why it felt wrong, but it did. We both stood there, not moving, until I heard the footsteps again. This time they were louder, more deliberate. And then, they stopped. I swallowed hard. "I think we should check it out." "What?" Sarah said, staring at me like I had lost my mind. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaky. I feel like we should see what's going on." Sarah looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But I'm not going first." We cautiously made our way toward the stairs. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I kept waiting for someone to step out, for a realtor to greet us, or for someone to explain the situation. When we reached the top of the stairs, we were hit by a strong smell, something metallic. Almost like blood. I gagged at the scent, but tried to ignore it. At the top of the stairs, there were 2 doors. One was closed, but the other was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, holding my breath. What I saw made my stomach drop. The room was set up like a normal bedroom, except it wasn't. There were strange marks on the floor, like something heavy had been dragged across it. A large rug was pulled to the side, revealing a section of the floor that had been scratched up. My heart was racing now, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I heard a noise from behind me and turned. Sarah was still standing in the hallway, but she looked pale. I took a step back toward her. "We need to leave now," I said. But as I turned to go, my foot caught on something. I looked down, and that's when I saw it, a small piece of rope. It was thin, but strong. The kind of rope you'd use to tie something up. I pulled on it, and the floorboard beneath me creaked, like something was being dragged under it. I felt like I was suffocating. "This is all wrong," I muttered. I backed away from the room and turned to Sarah. "We need to call the police. This place it's a trap." As I started toward the stairs, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The door to the master bedroom was open, and the closet door was hanging half off its hinges. Inside, I could see the faint outline of a bag, but it wasn't just any bag, it was a large, heavy-duty duffel bag. My heart pounded, and my instinct screamed at me to run. "We need to get out of here, now," I whispered to Sarah, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her toward the stairs. As we rushed toward the front door, I glanced back at the living room. The house was eerily silent. No sign of anyone, but the feeling that we weren't alone lingered. We got to the front door, but just as I reached for the handle, the door slammed shut. I turned to Sarah, panic setting in. "What the hell?" The sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. Heavy, deliberate. Someone was coming. I didn't wait. I grabbed the handle again and yanked as hard as I could, throwing open the door. We ran out of the house and didn't look back. We didn't stop until we were in the car, and I drove as fast as I could, not saying a word. When we got to the nearest police station, We told them everything. They sent a team to check the house, but by the time they arrived, the place was completely empty. No sign of anyone. They told us there were no records of the house being on the market at all. The agency we contacted, they said they had no idea who the realtor was. It was as if everything about that house had been fabricated. I don't know who set that trap or what they were planning to do, but I know one thing for sure: we were lucky to get out of there alive. The rain had started before I left the office, but I didn't think much of it. By the time I was halfway home, it was coming down in sheets, so heavy my wipers couldn't keep up. It was one of those back roads, winding and narrow, with no lights except for my own headlights cutting through the dark. I was going slower than usual, but the pavement was slick and the turns were sharp. I don't even remember what I hit. It could have been a branch or a patch of water pooling on the curve. My tires slid, and before I knew it, I was skidding off the road. The car slammed into something, maybe a tree, and came to a stop. My chest hurt from the seatbelt digging in, but I wasn't bleeding. I tried the engine, but it just sputtered. Dead. I grabbed my phone, but the signal was gone. It was too far out, too isolated. The rain was coming down so hard that staying in the car felt useless. I had seen a house just a little way back. I figured I could at least ask to use their phone. Leaving my car felt wrong, but what else could I do? I put up my hood and stepped out, the rain soaking through my shoes almost immediately. The house wasn't far, maybe a quarter-mile at most. It was big, an old farmhouse kind of place, sitting back from the road with a long gravel driveway. The lights were on inside, which made me think someone would help. I jogged up to the porch, trying to shake off the water before I knocked on the door. I waited, shivering. The rain made everything sound muffled, like the world had shrunk to just me in this house. No one answered. I knocked again, harder this time. A light flicked on upstairs, and I saw a shadow move behind the curtains. Someone was home. I knocked again and called out, "I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down. I just need help." After a few seconds, I heard the lock turn, and the door opened just a crack. A man stood there, older, maybe in his late 60s, with thin hair and a lined face. He was holding the door with one hand, and the other was hidden behind it. His eyes were sharp, watching me closely. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. "My car's stuck down the road," I said. "It won't start, and I don't have a signal. I just need to use your phone, if that's okay." He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked me up and down. Then he nodded and opened the door wider. "Come in." The inside of the house smelled old, like wood and dust. The hallway was narrow, with faded wallpaper and a single bulb overhead casting long shadows. The man didn't speak as he shut the door behind me, and I noticed he slid the bolt across once it was closed. It felt strange, but I told myself it was just an old habit. "The phone's in the kitchen," he said, motioning down the hall. "You can use it." "Thank you," I said, trying to sound grateful. I followed him down the hall, my wet shoes squeaking on the floor. The kitchen was small, with a table in the corner and an old rotary phone mounted on the wall. I picked it up and listened for a dial tone, but there was nothing. "It's dead," I said, turning back to him. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew. "Storm must have knocked it out," he said. "Happens a lot out here." I didn't know what to say. I was stuck now, completely at his mercy. "Do you have a cell phone?" I asked, hoping he might have something newer. Don't use them, he said flatly. But you're welcome to wait here until the rain lets up. Maybe the phone will come back. I didn't have much choice, so I nodded. Thank you, I said again. He motioned to the table. Sit. I'll get you something warm. I sat down, the chair creaking under me. He moved to the stove, where a kettle was already sitting. I tried not to stare, but something about the way he moved felt off, like he was too deliberate, too careful. His hand shook a little as he poured the water, but his face stayed calm, almost blank. When he set the mug in front of me, I noticed his hand lingered on the edge of the table, just for a second. I looked down and saw faint scratches in the wood, like someone had dragged a knife across it over and over. My stomach tightened. You live here alone? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. Been here all my life. Don't get many visitors. I sipped the tea, even though I wasn't thirsty. It was bitter, and I wondered if he added something to it. The thought made me feel stupid, paranoid, but I couldn't shake it. He was just standing there, watching me, not drinking anything himself. I should probably get back to my car, I said, setting the mug down. Maybe someone else will come by. His face hardened. You'll stay, he said. It's too dangerous out there. I froze. The way he said it wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. I'll be fine, I said, standing up. Really, thank you for your help, but I don't want to bother you anymore. He stepped in front of me, blocking the door. You can't leave, he said, his voice colder now. Not yet. I glanced past him, toward the hallway. My heart was pounding. Why not? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. It wasn't big, but it was sharp, and he held it like he knew how to use it. Sit down, he said. I backed up, my mind racing. The window over the sink was small, but I thought I could fit through it if I had to. The rain was still pounding outside, and the glass was fogged up, but it was better than staying. I don't want trouble, I said. I just want to leave. He shook his head slowly. You shouldn't have come here. Before he could move, I grabbed a mug from the table and threw the hot tea at him. He screamed, clutching his face, and I bolted for the window. The latch was stiff, but I forced it open and scrambled through, landing hard in the mud outside. I ran, not looking back, slipping and stumbling in the rain. I could hear him shouting, but his voice faded as I put more distance between us. When I reached the road, I didn't stop. I kept going until I saw headlights in the distance. I waved my arms, desperate, and the car slowed. A woman rolled down her window, looking concerned. Are you okay? She asked. Please, I said, breathless. I need help. There's a man back there, he has a knife. She unlocked the door, and I climbed in, shaking and soaked. She called the police as we drove away. I told them everything, but when they went to the house, it was empty. No sign of a man, no sign of anyone. I don't know where he went, but I still think about that night. About what could have happened if I hadn't gotten out. It's hard to know where to begin with this. I think it's taken me so long to write this because it still feels like a bad dream. Even now, when I think about it, I can't shake the feeling that something went horribly wrong that day, something that could have been avoided if we just made different choices. We were all experienced hikers, at least a little, and we planned this trip for months. The idea was to camp in the mountains for a weekend, just to disconnect from everything. It was supposed to be simple. We'd done this kind of thing before, just not in this particular area. The weather had been fine the whole trip, and the first couple of days went off without a hitch. We had our laughs, we cooked our meals over a fire, and everything felt normal, almost too normal. By the third day, we were packing up to head back. It was late afternoon, and we had been moving slowly through the trails, not wanting to rush. But when we reached a certain point, one of the guys, Mark, suggested taking a shortcut. He'd been to this area a few times before, and apparently, this canyon was a faster way back to our camp. We all thought it was a good idea. We had a little time to spare, and the weather was holding up. It seemed like a quick detour that would save us some hours. None of us thought twice when Mark led the way. The canyon was narrow, with sheer rock walls on either side, but it didn't look dangerous. In fact, it looked beautiful in a way, like something out of a postcard. We walked through, chatting and laughing, taking in the view, oblivious to how quickly the time was slipping away. It wasn't until we'd gotten about halfway through that we noticed something wasn't right. At first, it was just a small sound, like gravel shifting behind us. Then it happened again. And again. It was almost like something was moving behind us, but when we turned around, there was nothing there. I remember feeling uneasy but brushing it off as nothing. Maybe just the rocks shifting, or the wind, who knows? But as we kept walking, the sound grew louder. It was like it was getting closer, and I could tell by the looks on everyone else's faces that they were starting to feel it too. But Mark, he didn't seem concerned. He kept saying it was nothing and urged us to keep going. We trusted him. That was our first mistake. I'm not sure what exactly happened after that. Maybe the sound was the beginning of it, or maybe it was just bad luck. But all of a sudden, the ground beneath us started to shake. It wasn't just a small tremor. The rocks above us began to shift, and before any of us could react, the entire side of the canyon gave way. I remember the sound first, the screech of stone scraping against stone, the crashing and rumbling as the rocks began to tumble down. And then the dust. It was like the world went gray all at once. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, and I remember feeling the ground jerk beneath me. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground, trying to cover my face from the dirt and rocks. I could hear the others yelling, but everything was muffled. The chaos was overwhelming, like the world was collapsing in on itself. When the dust finally started to settle, I opened my eyes. The canyon walls had changed. What had once been a clear path was now a mess of rocks and debris, completely blocking our way. Mark was the closest to me, his face covered in dirt, but he was alive. I could see he was trying to stand, his legs shaky. We all helped each other up, but the reality of the situation hit hard. We were trapped. The narrow canyon we'd been walking through was now impassable, and there was no way to climb out. I remember looking up and realizing that the canyon walls were too steep, too smooth to climb. And no matter how many times we shouted, no one came. We were completely alone. There were no other hikers, no signs of life, just the sound of the wind and our panic breathing. I looked around at the others. We had a few supplies of water, some food, our basic camping gear, but nothing that could help us get out of there. The worst part was the silence. It felt like we were miles from help, and in that moment, it hit me that no one knew where we were. We hadn't checked in with anyone, and I wasn't sure anyone even knew which way we'd gone. We hadn't planned for something like this. The first few hours were spent trying to move the rocks, trying to dig our way out, but it was useless. Every time we thought we'd found a way through, more rocks would shift, making it harder to get through. We had enough water to last us a while, but that didn't make the fear go away. It was becoming clear that our time was running out. We couldn't stay here. We needed to get out. By nightfall, things got worse. It was already getting cold, and the air was thick with dust. We huddled together for warmth, but I could tell we were all exhausted. Mark was the one trying to keep everyone calm, but even he seemed rattled. No one said it out loud, but we all knew it. We were stuck. No one was coming to help, and the rocks above us could still fall. We rationed the food and water, but with the days dragging on, it didn't seem like it would be enough. The next morning, we made a decision. There wasn't much we could do at that point, but we had to try something. We needed to get to higher ground to see if we could find a way out. But even that felt like a stretch. As we moved toward the top of the canyon, trying to find a way through the rocks, one of the guys, Sam, tripped and twisted his ankle. It wasn't just a sprain. The way he screamed when he fell, I knew it was bad. We had to stop and tend to him, and that delayed us even further. But in the back of my mind, I knew that we were running out of time. The reality was starting to sink in. After a few days, when it seemed like we might not make it out, something changed. We had all been silently wondering if it was possible that we weren't alone in this canyon. The silence around us was so complete that it felt unnatural. And then, one afternoon, Mark disappeared. I don't know how he did it. I don't know if he was trying to find help, or if he'd just gone crazy, but he was gone. He'd left without a word. We searched for hours, but there was no sign of him. It felt like he just vanished. That's when I knew we weren't going to make it out without help. It was too dangerous to keep going alone. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I managed to climb up to the top of the canyon, to a small ledge where I could get a better view. From there, I could see the main trail that we had taken days earlier. I could see the small stream where we had camped, just a few miles away. I knew we had to make it. It wasn't much, but it was the only chance we had left. We made it back to camp just in time. It was a hard climb down, and Sam was still hurt, but we made it. I don't know how we survived that canyon, but we did. We were lucky, I guess. I still don't know what happened to Mark. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully explain this. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I'm driving through empty stretches of road. It happened a little over a year ago, but I can't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I've traveled alone a lot before, but this time, well, let me just tell you what happened. It was late at night. I was driving across the country, headed to a small town in the middle of nowhere. It was the kind of drive where you're miles away from any real civilization, just long stretches of dark roads and occasional small towns. I had been on the road for hours, and my gas gauge was starting to dip into the red, so I pulled off the main road to stop at a gas station I saw in the distance. I didn't think anything of it. The place looked normal enough from the outside, a small, rundown gas station with one of those old, flickering lights above the door. The only car at the pumps was a beat-up pickup truck with a thick layer of dirt on it. I parked near the pump and got out, stretching my legs and trying to shake off the exhaustion. I noticed the gas station attendant almost immediately. He was standing behind the counter inside, watching me as I walked up to the door. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap. He had the look of someone who'd been doing this job for years, probably in the middle of nowhere for most of his life. His eyes were wide, a little too wide, and he seemed jittery, like he was on edge. I couldn't help but feel a little off just from looking at him. I opened the door and walked inside. He was still watching me, but didn't say anything at first. I grabbed a bottle of water and some chips, then walked up to the counter. He didn't even ask how I was doing or if I needed anything else. Instead, he just looked at me and said, "You need to leave. You need to go. Now." I froze. I thought I heard him wrong. I glanced around, expecting maybe a big storm or something outside. But everything seemed fine. It was just dark, quiet, and nothing seemed out of place. I chuckled nervously, thinking he was joking, and asked, "What's wrong?" His voice dropped low, almost like a whisper. "Just leave. You don't want to be here when they come through." I didn't know what to make of it. I figured he was just some paranoid guy. Maybe he had a rough night or something. But the urgency in his voice, the way he kept looking at the window like he was expecting someone, it didn't feel right. I paid for my stuff quickly, thinking I should just get going, but when I turned to leave, I saw a truck pull up outside. It wasn't the beat-up pickup anymore. It was a black SUV, one of those big ones that look intimidating, like the kind of car you'd see in a movie when someone's trying to make a dramatic entrance. It rolled up slowly, stopping just a little too close to my car. I stepped outside, trying to stay calm. My first instinct was to just get in my car and leave. I wasn't looking to get into any weird situation in the middle of nowhere. But as I approached my car, the door of the SUV opened. A man got out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. He didn't say anything, just watched me. I could feel my stomach tighten, a weird, uneasy feeling creeping up on me. I walked faster, trying not to look directly at him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was staring right at me. My hand was on the door handle when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey!" I turned around. It was the gas station attendant, standing in the doorway now. "You need to leave. Get in your car and don't stop. Go." His face was pale, almost gray, and he was sweating. I could tell he was genuinely scared. I didn't know what to do. The man from the SUV was still watching me, not moving, not saying a word. I could see that he was just standing there like he was waiting for something, or maybe someone. I got in my car quickly, locking the door behind me. I started the engine, and just as I was about to put it in reverse, the man from the SUV stepped in front of my car. I slammed my foot on the brake, the tires screeching a little as I stopped just inches from him. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my palms starting to sweat as I stared at him, trying to figure out what to do. The attendant was still standing in the doorway of the gas station, watching us both. He didn't seem like he was going to intervene. He just stood there, his hands trembling. I didn't know if this guy was going to hurt me or what. I considered just driving off, even if I had to run him over, but something told me it wasn't a good idea. I was in the middle of nowhere, in a place I didn't know. The gas station attendant's warning was still ringing in my head, and I wasn't sure I wanted to take any chances. Finally, the man moved. Slowly, deliberately, he took a step back and gestured toward the road. He didn't say anything, but I could tell from the look on his face that he wanted me to go. I didn't need any more encouragement. I didn't wait for him to move completely out of the way. I just threw the car in reverse and sped off, not looking back. I didn't stop until I was miles down the road, my hands still shaking on the wheel. I don't know who those people were, or what they were planning, but I've never felt so unsafe in my life. The gas station attendant's face kept flashing in my mind, his fear so palpable, like he knew something I didn't. Like he knew I had to leave before it was too late. I didn't stop anywhere else that night, and I didn't trust any more gas stations on that trip. I didn't feel safe, and I didn't want to find out what would have happened if I had stayed any longer. I still don't know what they were up to. And I don't think I want to. Sometimes, when I drive alone now, I wonder if I'll ever run into them again. I went to the grocery store last week, just like I always do. It was a normal day, nothing strange, and I wasn't in a hurry. I parked near the back of the lot because it was crowded, but that didn't bother me. I kind of like the walk, it gives me a moment to breathe before diving into errands. The store was busy, so it took me a little longer than usual to get everything I needed. When I came out, it was starting to get dark. The street lights in the parking lot were on, but they didn't do much. You know that kind of half-light where you can see, but everything feels off? That's how it was. I walked to my car with my bags in hand, not thinking about much, just going through the motions. I noticed a piece of paper stuck under my windshield wiper when I got close. It was one of those bright yellow flyers, the kind you'd expect to see for a car wash or some event. At first, I didn't even think it was odd. People leave stuff like that all the time. I set my bags in the back seat and walked around to grab the flyer. It was stuck under the wiper pretty good, so I had to tug at it. While I was pulling it free, I heard footsteps behind me. Not the kind you hear from far away, but close, too close. I froze for a second, just holding the flyer, and then I turned my head. There was a man standing there, maybe a few feet away. He wasn't holding anything, didn't look like he worked there, and he didn't say anything right away. He just stood there, staring at me. He looked normal enough, jeans, a jacket, dark hair, but something about the way he was standing made me feel like I was in trouble. "Hey," he said finally, his voice calm but low. "You need help with something?" I shook my head. "No, I'm good. Thanks." My voice came out steadier than I felt, but my heart was starting to race. He wasn't smiling or anything, just looking at me like he was waiting for something. I tried to brush it off, turned back to my car, and tossed the flyer into the passenger seat. When I reached for the door handle, I felt his hand grab my arm. Not rough, but firm, like he'd done it before. My first instinct was to pull away, but he was strong. "You're coming with me," he said. Still calm, still too quiet. His tone made my stomach turn. "No, I'm not," I managed to say, yanking harder. I was starting to panic now, and my mind was racing. He didn't look angry or frustrated, just determined. Like he already knew how this was going to go. I didn't even see the van until he started pulling me toward it. It was parked just a few spaces down from my car, one of those older white ones with no windows in the back. The kind you see on TV and know to avoid. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might faint, but I knew I couldn't let him get me in that van. I screamed. Loud. As loud as I could. I didn't care who heard, I just needed someone to notice. He didn't flinch, just kept pulling me toward the van like my screaming didn't matter. That scared me more than anything because it felt like he'd done this before, like he knew how to handle it. I kicked at him, struggled, tried to twist free, but his grip didn't loosen. He was dragging me now, my feet barely staying under me. The van's side door was open, and I could see the inside, a mess of blankets, rope, and something that looked like duct tape. My mind was screaming at me to fight harder, but I felt so weak, like I wasn't strong enough to stop him. Then I remembered my keys. They were in my pocket, and I reached for them blindly, my fingers shaking so much it took me a second to get them out. I didn't think, just swung my arm and jabbed the sharp end of the key into his hand as hard as I could. He yelled. For the first time, he made a noise, and his grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free. I stumbled backward, almost falling, but I caught myself and ran. I didn't look back, didn't even think. I just ran toward the store, where I could see people coming in and out. I was yelling for help, my voice shaking, and a couple of people turned to look. A man near the entrance came toward me, asking what was wrong. I tried to explain, but I could barely get the words out. He tried to grab me. Over there. By my car. The guy didn't hesitate. He turned and started walking toward the parking lot, yelling something like, "Hey, you stay there." I followed behind him, but when we got back to my car, the man and the van were gone. My groceries were still in the back seat, my keys on the ground where I dropped them. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pick them up. The guy who'd come to help me stayed with me until the police arrived. I filed a report, told them everything I could remember, but they didn't seem too hopeful. They said they checked the security cameras, but I haven't heard anything back yet. I still don't know who he was or why he picked me. All I know is that I've never been so scared in my life, and I'll never park in the back of a lot again. I don't know why I remember everything about that night so clearly. Maybe it's because it was the last time I ever went to a party like that. Or maybe it's because what happened still feels unreal, even though I know it happened. I'm not really a party person, but I went because a few friends from work were going, and I needed a break from the usual routine. You know how it is, you get tired of the same old thing and want to mix it up. It was a house party, nothing special, and it was already past midnight when I arrived. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, just a group of people having drinks, playing music, laughing, that kind of thing. The house was in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, far enough from the main strip to be isolated but close enough that people could walk there if they wanted to. The hosts, a couple of guys I didn't know that well but had met through my friend Jake, greeted me at the door. They were in their late 20s, a bit younger than me, but they seemed friendly enough. I said my hellos and stepped inside. The place was packed, there were at least 20 people. Everyone was talking, laughing, dancing, and the music was loud. The usual party vibe. At first, everything felt normal. I grabbed a drink and joined the crowd near the back, just people watching mostly. After a while, I started to notice someone who didn't fit in. He was standing off to the side, not talking to anyone, just watching. I'm not sure why it stood out to me at first. He was dressed in dark clothes, not formal but also not like the casual partygoers. He had a serious expression, almost like he wasn't there to have fun, just observing. I didn't think too much about it at the time. Maybe he was just a quiet guy, or someone who didn't know anybody but still came anyway. But there was something strange about the way he stood. It wasn't the usual kind of wallflower thing where someone just hangs back and doesn't engage. This guy didn't just look bored or awkward. He was scanning the room, his eyes moving fast, from person to person, always looking. It was as if he was taking inventory of everyone there, and that made me uneasy. I saw him a few more times throughout the night. He never moved from his spot near the edge of the room, but he was always watching. It was like he was studying us. I tried to push the feeling away, telling myself I was just overthinking it. People get weird at parties, right? Maybe he was shy, maybe he was drunk and just zoning out. But the way he never interacted with anyone, how he just stood there, watching, made me feel like I wasn't imagining it. Around 2 a.m., the music started to get louder, the crowd started to get rowdier, and I figured it was about time to head home. I didn't know anyone very well at the party, and I was starting to feel like I was just standing there, staring at the same faces for hours. As I turned toward the door to leave, I saw him again, still in the same spot, still looking. But this time, something was different. I walked toward the door, but I noticed out of the corner of my eye that he was moving. He didn't walk like someone who was just heading for the kitchen or to the bathroom. It wasn't like he was casually making his way across the room. It was like he was following me without actually moving toward me. I didn't know why, but I could feel his eyes on me. I glanced over at him, and our eyes locked for just a second. I can't explain what happened next. I wish I could. I don't know why it suddenly felt like I was the one being hunted. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, so focused, so intent, like he knew exactly what I was going to do before I did it. I kept my gaze on him for a moment too long, and then I turned back to the door. I was almost out of the room when I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of someone standing behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was him. I felt him close, too close, and I knew he was following me. I kept walking faster, just trying to get out. My heart was pounding in my chest. My hand was on the doorknob when I heard his voice, soft but unmistakable. Leaving so soon? I froze. It was him, right behind me. I didn't turn around to answer. I could barely even breathe. I wanted to bolt out of that door, but I was paralyzed. "Why don't you stick around?" he said again, quieter this time, almost like a suggestion. It wasn't threatening, not in a direct way, but it was so wrong that it made me sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just turn around and face him. I knew if I did, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from showing just how scared I was. Instead, I twisted the knob and stepped outside. The cool night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop moving. I walked as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I made it to the sidewalk, and I couldn't stop myself from looking over my shoulder. I didn't see him right away, but that didn't mean he wasn't there. I kept walking, faster now, not caring that I was probably drawing attention from anyone who might be nearby. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, but it was too quiet. I didn't even stop to check if he was still inside. I didn't care. I got to my car, got inside, locked the doors, and just sat there for a while, trying to calm myself down. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the steering wheel. It felt like he was still watching me, even though I couldn't see him. I couldn't shake that feeling, not all the way home. I never went back to another party like that. I don't know what that guy's deal was or why he was there, but I haven't seen him since. Every time I hear a knock at my door late at night, I freeze. The memory of his voice, his presence, has stayed with me. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did, but I know I don't want to find out. I had just finished a long day at work and wanted to grab a few things from the grocery store before heading home. It was late in the evening, around 8:30 p.m., and the store was quieter than usual, with only a handful of people scattered around the aisles. I was tired but just trying to get in and out as quickly as possible. I didn't think much of the empty shelves or the dimmed lights, just focused on my list and getting home. As I moved through the aisles, something caught my eye. A man was walking just a few paces behind me. I didn't pay much attention at first. It wasn't unusual to see people in the same aisles when you're picking out groceries. But then it happened again. I rounded the corner to the next aisle, and so did he, right behind me, just a few feet away. It wasn't anything too obvious, but I started to feel watched. A little uncomfortable. I picked up a box of cereal and glanced over my shoulder. He was still there. Not directly looking at me, but I could feel his presence. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I moved on, heading towards the produce section. I reached for some tomatoes and noticed him again, only this time he was standing a little too close to me. I could feel the air shift, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly looked down at my cart, pretending to rummage through it. He was still there, and this time, it wasn't subtle. I kept telling myself to stay calm. This was a grocery store, after all. People shop, and maybe he was just trying to pick up some items too. But the way he was lingering was starting to feel wrong. I didn't recognize him from the store, and I couldn't remember seeing him earlier in the aisles. I kept glancing around the store, trying to see if anyone else had noticed him, but no one seemed to be paying attention. It was just the two of us, and I began to feel like I was trapped in some kind of vacuum, the space around me growing smaller with every step I took. I grabbed what I needed, trying to keep moving, trying to stay focused on my list. But each time I turned down a new aisle, there he was always just a few steps behind. Sometimes he would stop, pretending to look at a shelf, and then start walking again when I did. At one point, I reached for a bag of flour, and when I straightened up, he was right there. Too close. "Excuse me," I muttered, trying to sound confident, though my voice was shaking slightly. He just smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was unsettling, almost as if he knew something I didn't. "Sorry," he said, his voice flat. He stepped aside, but his eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than was comfortable before he moved to the next aisle. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart started pounding in my chest. I hurried to finish my shopping, grabbing the last few items as quickly as I could, trying not to glance back. I just wanted to get to the checkout, get out of there, and go home. When I finally made my way to the register, I noticed the man again, standing in line a few spots behind me. This time, I made sure not to look back at him, but I could feel his presence, like a shadow on the back of my neck. I paid quickly, practically running through the checkout process. The cashier didn't seem to notice anything, or maybe they were just too busy with their own work. I didn't care. I left the store, trying to stay calm, to look casual. My mind was racing, and I could hear my footsteps echoing on the pavement as I walked to my car. It wasn't until I reached the end of the row that I saw him again, standing by his car, just a few spots over from mine. My stomach dropped. I couldn't remember what kind of car he drove, but there it was, a sedan with tinted windows, parked next to my own. I didn't know for sure if he was waiting for me, but something told me that he was. I stopped in my tracks. I didn't want to seem like I was panicking, but I could feel the dread creeping up my spine. I wasn't sure what to do. I couldn't just go back into the store. I couldn't go back to the register and make a scene. I needed to get to my car, but I was too scared to walk towards it now. I stood there for a moment, pretending to adjust my purse and looking around to see if anyone else was still in the parking lot. The place was nearly empty now. I could see a couple of cars far off in the distance, but no one close. The parking lot was eerily quiet. My pulse was thudding in my ears. I checked my phone quickly, no messages. No calls. I glanced back at the man. He was still standing there, facing away from me, but I knew he had to have seen me by now. He hadn't gotten into his car. He hadn't moved an inch. Just waiting. Watching. I thought about calling someone, but my hands were shaking. I didn't want to make any rash decisions and risk alerting him that I was onto him. I tried to breathe through the anxiety rising in my chest. I could feel the panic beginning to build, but I forced myself to move. Slowly, I stepped back toward my car, making my way down the row of vehicles, keeping my eyes fixed ahead of me. I felt like every step took forever. When I was just a few feet away from my car, I hesitated. Was he really going to do something? Was he just waiting for me to get close enough? I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew I had to get in my car, fast. I reached for my keys, keeping my eyes fixed on his car. I unlocked the door and slid inside, locking it immediately. My hands were still shaking, and I could barely get the key into the ignition. I glanced in my rearview mirror, but the parking lot was empty. He wasn't there anymore. My heart was racing in my chest as I finally started the engine and backed out of the space. I didn't look back. I drove straight home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It wasn't until I got inside my apartment and locked the door that I felt like I could breathe again. But even then, I kept thinking about that man. The way he followed me, the way he just stood there waiting by his car. The sick feeling in my stomach didn't go away until well into the night. I didn't go out again alone for the next few days. I stayed home, and even when I did go out, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching me. I don't know if that man was just looking for someone to talk to or if he had other intentions, but I wasn't willing to stick around long enough to find out.